Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry that we're a few minutes late getting started tonight. Sego ani buju wacheya kwe kwe. As the mayor of the city of Kingston, I offer these words in the spirit of this gathering. Let us bring our good minds and hearts together as one to honor and celebrate these traditional lands as a gathering place of the original peoples and their ancestors who were entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. It is with deep humility that we acknowledge and offer our gratitude for their contributions to this community, having respect for all as we share the space now and walk side by side into the future. So, Council was meeting in committee of the whole closed meeting. We did discuss a few items, the casino gaming facility, 495 to 513 Frontenac Street, and the Princess Street Phase 3 RFP process. So I'll ask for a motion to rise without reporting.
It's moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Stroud. The Council rise from committee of the whole closed meeting without reporting.
So please vote. And that carries. Next, we have the approval of the addeds. We have a couple of extra delegations and some changes to who's appearing for a delegation and for a briefing. We have a motion of congratulations and a motion of condolence and some communications. Can I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Bones, seconded by Councillor Turner. Please vote. And that carries. Are there any disclosures of potential pecuniary interest? Councillor Schell.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I, Liz Schell of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of Committee of the Whole closed meeting, Clause 1B, as my son works for Ontario Lottery and Gaming in Gananoque. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor George.
Thank you, Your Worship. I, Kevin George of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of Clause 4 of the Committee of the Whole closed meeting, as my company has been in contact with the applicant in question.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other disclosures of potential pecuniary interest, we have no presentations this evening, so we will move right to delegations. Our first delegation this evening is Peter Kingston, Michael Kautz, and Ewan McKinnon, Kingston First, who will appear before Council to speak to the forthcoming review process and transition plan provided by the Kingston Economic Development Corporation. And just a reminder to all of our delegations that you have 5 minutes.
Your Worship, Mayor Patterson, members of Council, City staff, and community members, thank you for the opportunity to present to you on behalf of Kingston First. My name is Peter Kingston, and I, along with our group, love Kingston, and I'm particularly fond of the name. Tonight, we would like to accomplish 3 goals with respect to our presentation. Goal number 1, explain why Kingston First was formed and outline our objectives. Goal number 2, review our suggestions for a KEDCO restructuring process. Goal number 3, extend our sincere offer of support through this critical time of transition. Goal number 1, clarify the objectives of Kingston First. It is simply to see a brighter economic future for our city. We believe that greater accountability, transparency, and clear measurement metrics is a part of that process. However, we have no interest in being a watchdog agency. Our goal is to be proactive in support of our economic development team. We have all volunteered our time and resources to this goal. The issues that brought about our formation are number 1, lack of communication. Number 2, a lack of transparency. And number 3, sparse and ambiguous reporting metrics. KEDCO reported 868 new jobs created in 2014 when we had one of the lowest industrial permit years on record. Not to take our word for this, but the recent industrial land strategy commissioned by the city and completed by Watson and Associates stated the following: the city should undertake a more comprehensive approach to marketing existing city-owned industrial lands with the aim of increasing industrial land absorption and development activity. This should include development of place branding for the city's industrial and business parks, preparation of a business attraction package, and utilizing a range of communication tools. And frankly, we're concerned with the return on our economic development investment. Goal number 2. Here are some key points we'd like Council to consider with respect to KEDCO's restructuring process. Number 1, it's time for Council to bring focus to economic development and create a mandate that is clearly defined. Council needs to implement a process that will ensure our economic development organization is not duplicating the efforts of other agencies and organizations. Point number 2, Council must develop a clearly defined definition of success for our economic development team. Let me tell you a story about when we look for examples of economic development models. We contacted a number of economic development organizations in Ontario. One of the economic development organizations recommended that work being done in Guelph as a best practice model to follow. When we contacted Guelph, they willingly shared their action plans along with a breakdown of their budget expenditures. Guelph's Economic Development Organization developed an easy-to-understand spreadsheet that summarizes each program, its budget, its expected outcome, and the team responsible for undertaking the program. This information is accessible to all. Our Economic Development Organization can and should do the same. Point number 3, like any organization, KEDCO cannot be expected to objectively evaluate itself and should not direct its own restructuring. We need our community's best and brightest on this important initiative. We call on Council to direct the KEDCO Board to create a task force for restructuring that is made up of fresh faces and fresh perspectives. This task force must create a business plan with an open process to gather wide-ranging public input. This business plan should define our economic development organization's mandate, define Kingston's metrics for economic success, and develop action plans and an organizational structure that will allow us to achieve those metrics. Goal number 3. Since Kingston first went public, many people have contacted us and shared their perspectives and ideas. We'd like to support Council by sharing some of those perspectives with you tonight. I would now like to turn it over to Ewan McKinnon and Michael Couts to reinforce our support for the process of restructuring our economic development efforts.
Good evening. My name is Ewan McKinnon, and I am here today, along with Michael Couts, to represent young business people and entrepreneurs in Kingston on behalf of Kingston First.
30 seconds.
We believe it is imperative to hear and incorporate the new perspectives in the creation of a new vision for growth in our city, and this should include young business people and entrepreneurs who are Kingston's future. We believe that things can be done in a better way, especially the return we have been getting on our economic development investment. We want to assist in the creation of a new vision for not just sustainability, but growth for our city. We don't have time to tell our stories in detail or voice all the ideas of the members of our community that have joined us in the gallery here today, but we hope you understand how important public input is to the successful restructuring of our economic development efforts. We must work together to build a more resilient economic future for the city of Kingston. We believe Kingston has the potential to be one.
Thank you.
Thank you
Are
for
there
your
any?
time.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Council? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our second delegation this evening is Willa Thayer, resident, who will appear before Council to speak to new motion number 4 with respect to the off-peak transit passes for residents living under the low-income cutoff. Ms. Thayer.
Good evening. My name is Willa Thayer. With my remarks, I'm hoping to win your support for giving low-income residents free bus transport during off-peak hours, the proposal outlined by new motion number 4. For me, transportation intersects with 2 other key issues. Oh, I'm sorry. As a single childless welfare recipient receiving a $656 a month benefit, I know firsthand that transportation around the city is a huge issue for poor people. Through speaking to you, I aim to give a human face to what the tremendous need for such a benefit looks like. And I hope that while you're listening, you'll keep in mind that offering free bus transport between 9:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. is an initiative that will cost the city very little. In fact, what you'd be doing is filling a huge need with a resource that is going almost unused, as anyone who has ever taken the bus midday would know. For me, transportation intersects with two other key issues: coping with the Kingston winter and obtaining food. Though I'm physically and mentally healthy, highly educated, and able to live frugally, knowing a lot about eating well on a tight budget, and not being a drinker or smoker, I simply do not have the money to pay for the bus to travel any part, let alone all, of the 25 or so miles a week that I bicycle or walk. And when it comes to stretching my budget to cover transportation, you should know that I have more to spend than some single childless welfare recipients, given that I pay just under $400 a month in rent, while others see housing consume nearly their entire benefit. As we reach mid-September, I'm keenly aware that winter, which I'm dreading, is just around the corner. While riding a bike is a viable way for me to travel around town 7 or 8 months of the year, it's all but impossible in January and February, and very difficult in much of December and March. When I've complained and moaned about having to walk on the bitterest February days, people have often suggested that I just take the bus. Time and again, I've encountered the false perception that welfare recipients get free transportation. And when it comes to purchasing a subsidized bus pass, the fact is that I simply do not have the $47 to spend on it because I badly need that money for other things. And when it comes to paying the fare for one bus ride, $2.75, that's equivalent to the cost of a cabbage and a small onion, vegetables for one for a few days. Walking, then, you might have concluded, is the perfect solution, but it's far from perfect, because it raises another problem, and that's walking right through the soles of my shoes or rain boots, something that I unfortunately manage to do every 4 months or so. And of course, buying new footwear is yet another expense. Inclement weather and obtaining food also collide in another way, and that's in the drudgery of getting groceries home from the store. By purchasing dried chickpeas instead of canned and powdered milk instead of liquid, I'm able to lighten my 1 mile trek. But on an icy cold day, that walk is downright miserable, and it's a walk that many, many users of food banks and meal programs also know well. To put in context the snapshot that I've given you of how I juggle cabbage, onions, powdered milk, and dried chickpeas while trying not to wear through shoes too quickly, I'll underline that even though I probably have fewer difficulties than many poor people when it comes to making my way around the city, I really struggle in the winter. And the budgetary strain of paying for transport adds to the challenge of trying to put food on the table for myself. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm counting on your votes.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegation? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, our third delegation this evening is Joe O'Connor, President of Soulforce Energy, Inc., who will appear before Council to speak to Report 87 received from the CAO with respect to the Municipal Council Blanket Support Resolution for rooftop and non-rooftop solar photovoltaic applications of less than 500 kilowatts made under the Provincial Feed-in Tariff Program 3.1. Mr. O'Connor. Going once, going twice. Okay. So, I have no other delegations listed. There are no other delegations to be added by council. We will move to briefings. So we have one briefing. We have Bo Wanschneider, Secretary, Board of Directors, Kingston Economic Development Corporation, Sandra Gibson, Treasurer, Board of Directors, KEDCO, Jay Amer, President, Amer & Associates, and Donna Gillespie, CEO, Interim, KEDCO, who will appear before council to provide a briefing with respect to their forthcoming review process and their transition plan over the next year.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm Bo Wanschneider. I'm a Director of Board of KEDCO. I've got Sandra Gibson with me here, who's Treasurer of the Board. I've got Donna Gillespie, who's the Interim CEO. And I've got Jay Amer of Amer Associates here to help me out talking. So I'm very pleased this evening to be invited to give you an update on KEDCO's activities. I'd also like to thank Peter and his delegation. I believe we have a very similar vision for what we want for Kingston, and thank you very much for your offer of assistance. Out of August board's planning session, 3 key issues were put forth for implementation. The first issue was Donna Gillespie was appointed as interim CEO. Donna will be in the position until we undertake the executive recruitment efforts next year. KEDCO staff has been tasked with the development of the 2016 annual budget with the intent to find further efficiencies in order to reduce the amount of our municipal budget request. And the third outcome of our retreat was the KEDCO board is establishing a review committee to look at the organization and ensure that KEDCO is delivering services that are of value to the community and are aligned with City Council's strategic priorities. We heard questions arising out of last year's election and during Council's budget process about what KEDCO does and its value to the community. We believe it is a good time to undertake a formal review and examine the organization. This has not been done since 2007, and the time is now. I'd like to invite Donna to provide an overview of the committee structure and timelines.
Thank you, Bo. The purpose of the review committee is to take an opportunity for the organization to look at itself and ensure KEDCO is delivering services that are of value to the community. The committee will provide a review of KEDCO's governance and operations and offer a recommendation to the KEDCO board and you, City Council, on how best to position Kingston's economy for future generations. This review will address organizational structure and capabilities in order for us to undertake, promote, and fund economic development activities and key performance indicators to gauge community and organizational success. The review committee shall develop and oversee public consultation activities to solicit feedback through online mechanisms, public meetings, delegations, industry-specific meetings, and such. We would like them to conduct a transparent review of KEDCO in comparison to other economic development organizations, and to offer recommendations for implementation to the KEDCO board and City Council. We see the committee composition being made up of 11 members, including 2 staff and 1 contracted external resource. That would include 2 KEDCO board members, plus myself, 2 city councilors, plus the CAO, 4 community members, and 1 external resources, knowledgeable in economic development organizations. In terms of a process for committee selection, we would see the board and council representatives being selected by a KEDCO call to those groups. We would like to see a public call at large for community members who have an interest in economic development activities to foster local investment, job creation, assessment growth, and community prosperity. Interested community members would submit expressions of interest to the City Nominations Committee, and City Council would confirm appointments of these 4 community members and the KEDCO board and council representatives. The review committee itself would select the external resource it would like to work with through this process. In terms of timelines, they're quite tight, but we would like to be as aggressive as possible so that we can move forward. We would like to see the call for community members take place in October, along with the selection of KEDCO board and City Council representatives, so that in November, we can confirm community members and have the entire review committee confirmed by City Council. Ideally, by the end of November, we have initial committee orientation meetings in order to confirm and review a process and determine the engagement of the public and to select our external resource. In December, we would be able to provide the committee with research and go through planning of public consultation activities, which would take place between January and March 2016. The goal would be to have a review of findings and a report back to the board and council by April of next year. As Bo mentioned, we have heard from council and citizens on the need for KEDCO to better engage with the community. We have also heard questions raised about how KEDCO compares to economic development organizations in other municipalities. To put this conversation in context, I'd like to invite Jay Amer of Amer & Associates to provide a snapshot of funding levels of other economic development offices. Jay is a certified economic development professional and past president of the Economic Developers Association of Canada.
Thanks, Donna, your worship, and members of council. It's great to be in this beautiful historic building. I'm from Peterborough. Ours is a little less spacious and not nearly as nice a setting, but I hope the Cogeco coverage doesn't go back there. It's just great to be here. I was asked actually last spring, I was talking to Kedco about another matter, and I was asked if I had done any work on comparative cost comparisons for economic development service delivery, which I have, both when I was working for a regional group and also for some clients. And so I indicated I could undertake this work and used, it was basically just a scan. It was a small project where I would use some of my past work, use public sources, and to make a few calls to some of my colleagues. I know everybody that runs virtually all those economic development offices or has. What we prepared was a study that basically took a very challenging topic to do a comparison, because every single economic development office is different. It is really truly apples, oranges, pineapples, and plums trying to compare. There's similar models, and I think you've all seen the report I put together, internal, municipal, external economic development corporations, and they all have their pros and cons and benefits. What we found, it was interesting because when you do a survey and talk to economic development offices, many of them don't always come clean with what all their expenses and costs are. For example, there's a few here, I don't even know if I included Kitchener, but they had like a $3 million fund under economic development, but it really was a bit of a go-to fund, but it was part of their budget. Guelph was mentioned earlier. It actually, under economic development, they have a community energy program. They also have a downtown revitalization program, which isn't reported in their economic development numbers. So it's very difficult to take A and compare it to B. And what we tried to do in the report was do overall costs, do costs with tourism, without tourism. Not all economic development offices do tourism, but it does take up a lot of the investment in many communities. And I saw that happen and still going on in Peterborough, which had a model that was modeled actually after Kedco, a regional group with external influence. So, but what was interesting, Kedco is a mature organization. It has grown. It covers more deliverables than any of the other studied communities. I could not find one that did everything that Kedco did, including doctor recruitment was one that most communities don't do. Doing tourism, economic development together is not always the way it goes. And the other key thing when comparing an economic development corporation with a municipality is many costs get buried in administration. And I actually called Peter Cartwright in Guelph to ask about the information he shared with your other community group. And those numbers are not included. So administration, HR, finance, a self-contained entity like Kedco, I do believe looks after most of that themselves. So I just want to give a quick overview. Again, this was a scan, I realized it was a tight budget for the organization. We did a scan using public information. I should mention it turned into something different early in the summer. I was actually somewhere just west of here on a golf course, and a gentleman came up, knew I worked in economic development, and mentioned the story in the Whig Standard that morning. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And then I got a call from Kedco. Jay, could you go a little further in depth into this report? So it was a very topical thing, and then I sort of did a little more fact checking on the numbers and tried to compare all those different fruits to come up with some numbers. But the real point is it's very difficult to compare. And as I mentioned in the report, and I've been involved heavily with the provincial government in helping economic development offices come up with performance measures and return on investment. It is important to have clearly defined returns on investment, and you can then make a full judgment on whether you're getting good value. But you look at one $10 million investment, 100 jobs, that translates into hundreds of millions of dollars of economic impact over the long term. So it is important to go back and look at that. So there's just a bit of a preamble and a bit of context. I worked with municipalities across Eastern Ontario. I actually represent the state of New York in Canada. So I have a good perspective on economic development offices across the lake and the incentives and challenge and opportunities they have when they're competing for businesses over here as well. So
30 seconds.
I think I should leave some time for someone else. So there you go. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Jay. I think that concludes our presentation, and we'll open it to questions on the floor.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. I would just like to know a little bit more about, so the comparisons, the value for money comparisons are really useful.
You're kind of fish and fowl at the same time. So I'm curious if there's a way that you could adopt more transparent practices. I appreciate that some of the things that you do are competitive with other organizations. So I'm not asking for the kind of wide open MFIPA thing, but the public whose tax dollars fund you should be able to have some access to information, even if it's redacted. Could you speak to that, or any of your colleagues speak to that?
Certainly. And going forward, the board and staff are working to address transparency and providing more information. So I think we heard in the delegation, the public would like to review annual sales and operating plans. So we publicly put out our strategic plans, but it is our intent this budget cycle to present our full 2016 sales and operating plan that aligns with our budget request. So you see exactly in the different portfolios how much investment we're looking for and where it will go. Last year, we transferred our financial services over to the City of Kingston, Financial Services Department. So they actually look after all of our accounts right now. And by doing that, not only was it more efficient, but it gives us greater capability and reporting functions. So we'll be able to break down the budget and be more transparent in those areas. I think over coffees, perhaps we've also talked about disclosure of elements of our budget, such as wages. And that's been brought up around the board table and something that our HR committee is going to look at. But currently, as a private corporation, we don't disclose salaries over $100,000 or the sunshine list because legally it would be a problem with us following the laws of Ontario. Salaries are a privacy issue. Because we're not primarily provincially funded, we are not required to disclose those salaries.
You did anticipate my next question, or one of my next questions. I know the Sunshine Law applies to all municipal employees and other public services, and I appreciate that you're governed by the Corporations Act. But when you don't have that level of transparency, there are kind of community rumors that get spread that everybody that works there would be on the sunshine list. Now, I'm sure that's not the case, but that's the perception. And so if there was some way, even if you didn't individually name people, but...
So Councillor Neal, is there a question?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
If there was a way that you could share that information, that would be great. And one other question, and this will be a question, I promise.
So before you do that, if you said that was a question,
Yes.
is there a response to that question?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and something that the board has talked about around salary disclosure and what can we do in this area. We are not required by the Act to disclose salaries. In the case in Ontario, when you aren't required to disclose them, there is an expectation by the employees that that is personal and private information. It's not directly in PIPEDA, but best practices would suggest we don't do that unless staff were well aware when they took on the position that these salaries would be disclosed. To counter that, what the board has done is it's reviewed the salaries and compared them to city salaries for comparable positions. And I can assure you that not everybody is on the sunshine list, and I can assure you that the salaries are all reasonable in comparison to what the city does. I think it's a fair question for the review process to look into how do we balance transparency and the rights and expectations of the individual. So it's a good question.
Thank you. And my final question has to do with appointments. I'm on the nominations committee, and I know when everybody sends their applications through the clerk's department, but in fact, there's a vetted list, if you will, that comes from CADCO, and we, for want of another word, kind of rubber stamp it as because it's because of your corporate status. I see clerks nodding. That's, I believe, the process. I'm curious as to why that is the case, and I know a few years ago there was indeed a Labor Council representative on CADCO, and who I think brought a lot of value added, and I see some nodding from members of CADCO, and that isn't the current practice, or it isn't currently the case. Could you comment on that and how much kind of input that city representatives might have on the appointments process?
I haven't been around long enough to comment on the past process, but I do know that when we move forward, we have a set of skill sets that we look for. So we're trying to fill out the board with as broad a set of skills as we can. And I'd say right now, if you looked at the board, it's a very diverse group of individuals. For this review process, I would like the committee that you're referring to take ownership of this and select those individuals. I don't think it's appropriate to do it any other way. Does that make sense?
I appreciate that. I see the mayor nodding, which is a good sign. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, thank you for your presentation tonight. I'm really pleased to see how quickly you've restructured and you're looking to the future and your future plans. I really think that's great. I have a question for you, though. In terms of the economic value of tourism in the Kingston greater area, do you have any plans for that, or what are your thoughts going forward with that in the future?
Could you clarify the question, the plans related to tourism or the economic impact?
In terms of the importance of it is to be within KEDCO. Like, are you going to keep it within KEDCO? Do you have thoughts for the future? Do you think it's important?
Certainly we see this as being a question that will be raised by the review committee. It's been raised in the community, and discussions have started in our conversations with the Kingston accommodation partners and tourism partners. There's a reason why it was initially aligned with KEDCO and is in our mandate, and that's because tourism is a significant economic sector for Kingston. It has huge growth potential, and it's been a fantastic summer. We just see growth in this area going forward. As a destination marketing organization, which Tourism Kingston is, in different communities of growing size, it often stands on its own and makes its own requests to its council or funding partners. That's certainly an area we can look at and are open to working with the industry on. We do see linkages that are very important and synergies between traditional economic development and tourism. Tourism is a key attractor of people, and it's these people who are the entrepreneurs, the innovators, the small business startups that can be looking at Kingston. These are future residents, future workers. Tourism is a great driver to showcase the city to a broad audience. So would like to ensure that going forward, we make sure we always take advantage of those synergies, but whether it's housed under KEDCO or not, that would be something we'd look to the review committee.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Candon.
Thank you, through your worship. My first two questions are for Mr. J. Amer. The first one is, in the spirit of transparency, would you be willing to share the information that got you to the point of making that graph? That could be valuable information, and how we would go about doing that. The second question is based on, you made a statement that it seems like KEDCO does a lot of things. Based on your knowledge and belief, do you think that we may be asking them to do too many things, or they may have too many balls in the air, based on your interpretation and expertise of development agencies?
Okay, the first answer, I provided that information to KEDCO, and they're free to share it, and that does include a listing of who does what of those communities. It's an Excel file and lists all the various categories, so certainly no problem showing the source. Again, it's all from public sources, and doing a scan of what was available, looking at municipal budgets that are all publicly available. On the second issue, could you just briefly repeat it again, your question?
Do you feel that we may be asking too many things?
So it depends on the capacity of the organization, the funder's ability and willingness to fund it, and the expectations that are coming back. As I said, I could not find another community that did all of the, I think there are 7 or 8 different fundamental service delivery items that were done by KEDCO. It can be done as one organization. There are some benefits to that. But when you start looking at comparisons, I look at a model like Quinte Economic Development. Quinte Economic Development Commission represents 4 communities. One of them isn't even within the Quinte region. It's Brighton. It's in Northumberland County. But they choose to pay this corporation to deliver their funds. Their economic development investment attraction only, and that's what shows up on their budget, because each of those 4 communities, Brighton, Quinte West, Belleville, and there's one other, all have their own economic development offices. So it's just a matter of what the will of the organization is. You look at other, London is another economic development model. Another one that's gone through great change, you've probably heard of Canada's Technology Triangle. It's been basically collapsed, and Waterloo is forming its own regional economic development corporation because they had a good run with that for many years. It's going to do different things, but having a bit of an inward review of what services you want this organization, and it really is up, I think, to the board to make the case they can do it, and for the stakeholders to feel they're getting value for their money.
So having said that, do you think that the community so far has seen 2 graphs, 2 different graphs? Do you think it's even reasonable to be looking at graphs, or should we just focus on the issues at hand rather than looking at graphs?
I 100% think you should be focused on your issues at hand. It doesn't hurt to do your homework and see where you fit in. There's one I didn't even include on here, and that's Greater Sudbury. It just went off the map. There's a reason for that. It could be something to do with mining, a special fund. I didn't dig into it. So what you're getting here is a snapshot that sort of shows, hey, you know, KEDCO, overall budget, and I think there is another slide here. Can I show that one? So overall budget. So this is economic development investment. You can see it ranges from anywhere from, several $100,000, $500,000 up to over $3 million. And you still fall in the mid-range. So I think it's important to see what you are investing and what your expectations are. I first did a study. I was working in Peterborough, and the very same thing came up. There was an internal review. This is probably 10 years ago. And one of the first things I tried to do was compare the value for funding. And what you find out, and why in the report we also include the percentage of municipal budget, typically what you'll see is it's less than 1% of a municipal budget, but the expectations are 120%, because you really want to see, everybody cares about economic development. I'm sure every councillor around here has got that at the top of their list. But the investment that goes into economic development doesn't really match the expectations. And anybody that works in business or in marketing, you need to invest 7 to 15% in marketing if you want to get returns, if you're selling, widgets or whatever. You don't see that in economic development. So it is finding the right balance and finding the model that works for your community. Many communities say, and especially when it's election year, we're going to bring it back in-house into City Hall, and sometimes there's merit for that. Having a regional model that works that is transparent, and that's an important thing, can be the best model because you are operating at the speed of business. That's the intent. I've dealt with councils before, and if someone's aware of information about a big investment coming, I have seen where that has been lost because it didn't stay in caucus. And it's critically important for representatives from council to be aware and briefed, and they should be involved in negotiations if there is an opportunity. But it's also important to be very cautious, and because if you're speaking specifically about an investor coming in, it could be gone tomorrow just by the wrong words or the wrong impression of a community. Like, this whole exercise is probably something that's a challenge. You're going through it very publicly, and any business is probably going to ask, what's going on with Kingston and economic development? Are they still going to be able to service our needs and pay attention to a company? So, but again, that's, you need to have this discussion. It's just the nature of the beast.
Based on your expertise, what have you seen, what tools or levels of communication have you seen where people can use these tools to communicate with the general public?
Well, doing quarterly reports, I think, is good at a council table. I've seen that happen where performance measures are put in. You do a community report. You have ongoing communications. You need to take advantage of your volunteer board members, council members. I mean, there's a real I've worked on boards where we had council members. The organization was going to break up, and the resolution, with all due respect, was to remove the council members and bring in CAOs, and I think that's the model that's still working in that case, because the focus needs to be on the purpose of the organization. So, you know, it really is a tough one to pin down.
One more question. Whenever the budget question comes up, people say we pay 3.6 to economic, or the total 3.2, and it's exactly half for tourism. Do we have an exact number for what we contribute towards tourism? Because everyone always just throws out half. Do we have an exact number as to what we contribute to tourism?
I've seen that number. I don't have it at the top of my head, but
I do have that number, just bear with me a moment.
actually, while you're looking for that, I just want to mention, it's really important, I think you know, when you're talking about economic development, tourism is economic development, and I think there's a real push from that industry to be treated as real economic development. So you look at the impacts, hundreds of millions of dollars in this area, no doubt, per year, it is a driver. But then when you start comparing results, sometimes it's more difficult to measure what the results might be from a new investment with good paying jobs compared to increased visitors. So I think that's a good point to consider.
To answer your question, in 2015, $1.565 million was invested in tourism compared to $1.710 in business development. So slightly higher for the business development side.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stanek.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I just have some questions about the scope of the review. So would one of the things include your current location and how visible it is to the general public? So council knows that you used to be downtown and then you moved to Innovation Park, which makes sense, it's next to Queens, you want that synergy there. But for the location itself, like what I've heard and what I've also read in letters to the editor is that, you know, you have to go into your office and it's a shared security desk with another office, and sometimes no one's there, so you have to ring the door and then just wait. And so I just wondered if maybe the entire location and if there's any way to improve the visibility of your office to the general public, if that could be part of the scope.
Most certainly, and feedback like that is important, and we want to see that through the public engagement process. And it's also timely as we will be coming towards the end of our existing lease, and we'll be starting the review of where we'd like to be located in the future.
Okay, perfect. I also just heard you say, which is great news, that improved communications, improved reporting could come about through this review. Another letter to the editor involved Salesforce, which is the contact management software package that you have, and that maybe that can be better utilized. And we saw the one email that came today to council, and it said that the board has seen some of the statistics gathered from Salesforce, course, how many calls have been made to our existing businesses, because it's very important that KEDCO concentrates on existing businesses, but also how many incoming calls, and if some of that information could be compiled and then, made available in these general reports, to the public, I think that would really help too, because we know that it's not just about how many new jobs are created, but for everyone in the public to know that, in 2014, we made 800 phone calls and visits to our existing businesses, and if you had a survey for them to do too, and 600 surveys were compiled, and these are the recommendations that came out of the surveys. Like, just the more information, the better, because during the election, what council heard was that a lot of people still were, vague about what KEDCO is, if they've heard of KEDCO, what KEDCO can do. So it's not just about the number of jobs, but exactly what it is that you do. And I know that you help out, but the more information out there for the public through this reporting mechanisms, I think the better would that be possible.
It certainly would be possible, and we did hear the need to find a better way to communicate different metrics and key performance indicators. So that is one of the tasks of the review committee, but internally we're already working on improving that and have members of our business development team looking at Salesforce and coming up with better ways to track and to be able to distill that information so that it resonates better with the community. Bo, did you have a...
Yeah, I just like to add something from the board perspective. This is some of the discussion that we've had over the last little while. So what has happened is the staff have come forward and shown us a lot of the details and sort of, let's say, the guts of Salesforce, and we've seen all the details. Fascinating. There's a lot there. They've been working to try to figure out how can we bundle this and share it. Certainly some of the information, we saw a lot of it last night. We were given some of the very detailed information, and we were given some summary reports. And we're trying to figure out how can we release these summary reports and protect some of the confidentiality of the information there. Some of it can be shared and some of it can't. But I'd say the staff are working diligently on trying to find a format, and the board's been reviewing that probably over the last, I'm going to say 4 to 6 months. So you'll be seeing more, and I think that can come out in the review process as well.
Thanks very much. And the final question, again, for the scope of the review, would it touch on your website at all? So it's my understanding that the website has been revamped, and I just wondered if it could still be a work in progress and if that would be revamped at all, further. Just some things is that when you go to your website, if you want to see which companies are, like past award winners, for example, there's a mention of the past award winners in the 2014 annual report, but there's nothing actually on your website, and if like someone could see which companies, like our success, right? We want to celebrate our successful companies in Kingston, and it could actually give a little bit of promotion to them too. So, like which ones won the awards, like the Chamber of Commerce, and I know that I think KEDCO sponsors like the Business Hall of Famers. So, in 2014, 2013, 2012, if that could just somewhere be on the website. And there's also your website for jobs if you want to get a job, because what we've heard from KEDCO over the years is that sometimes there's a mismatch between what the employers are looking for and they can't find the people with the right skills. So you have that website called KingstonIsHiring.com. And you always put it on that weekly email for, what you call it, Kingston Economics, I think, right? But on your website, if that could just be more visible right on the homepage, instead of people having, what is the name of that website? Like, how are they going to find the website? So if that could be on the homepage. So just little tweaks still to the website, if that could be possible as part of the scope.
Oh, most certainly, and we're always open to feedback such as that to continually improve. We have three main sections of our website, and they're in constant renewal and constant upgrading.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a few quick questions. Looking at the review process, you've got an aggressive timeline and a few public meetings associated. We, as a municipality, are experts at public meetings. We have a lot of them. But it doesn't necessarily always achieve the engagement that we're seeking. And in terms of the engagement that the community seems to have on this. Do you anticipate other approaches for that committee to engage outside of the public meeting process so that we can ensure the conversation spans our community in a fulsome way?
Excellent question, and most certainly. While we'll appreciate that having public meetings or town halls is a traditional way to allow delegations to come in and to have feedback, I believe it's really important, and the board feels it's important to go out to the residents in the community. So would like to work with the committee in one of the initial orientation meetings to determine and to look at different forums or vehicles to best get feedback. So that could be going district by district and working with councillors to meet up with your residents. It could be online forums, be it a survey or feedback area. It could be going out on the street and intercepting people and asking a set of questions. So how do we get to the people rather than requiring them just to come to us to provide feedback?
Great, thank you. I wanted to ask you what you found in recent years to be the biggest 2 or 3 challenges on the economic development side for your organization and our city.
Two or three biggest challenges. Definitely one is from a communication standpoint, being able to explain our services clearly and to show a line with the return on investment. Economic prosperity means so many different things to different people, and they place different values on that. So to try to come up with measurables or stories that resonates with everyone is very challenging. I think also the wide variety of perspectives that we bring as residents, it's a benefit definitely to Kingston and creates great dialogue and debate. But again, we have a variety of different really important interests that we're trying to meet. We have a strong public sector, but we have an equally strong small and medium business base, and we need to support those needs. So making sure our service delivery is aligned with what the community wants is something that's a challenge and the board regularly looks at.
Thank you. And just following up on that, what do we, sorry, I lost your name for a second, but your consultant, Jay, mentioned entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs as sort of a key piece in our economic development future, both in our community and across communities in Canada. And what are we currently doing to support entrepreneurs so that we have a bit of a baseline to think about when we go into this review?
Currently, there's a variety of different activities underway that support entrepreneurism in our community. We have a strong small business development center, which is funded in part by the province of Ontario to support small businesses. And that includes youth entrepreneurship programs. Many of you might have attended in previous years or this year, the Summer Company, which looks at a great program that brings in 20+ students over the summer to give them the basic concepts of how to run a business. We've had great success in those students post-graduation, continuing on and starting up full-time businesses. We also run a starter company, which is for youth, but those outside of school to help them enter into the small business world. We're also working closely with Innovation Park at Queen's University and Launch Lab. We've launched programs such as Grind Space, which is an accelerator program to help commercialized research out of Queen's and other institutions get to the offering stage, and are looking at ways to, with the City of Kingston, to brand the city as a center of innovation and entrepreneurism and come up with ways to better celebrate the success stories.
Thank you. I have just 2 more quick questions, and one is just following up on the entrepreneurship category. Do you see the role or future role of economic development, and any of you can answer this, in our region as also attracting, say, capital for our entrepreneurs? the biggest resource that entrepreneurs need. It sounds like we have a lot of skills, programs and supportive programs, but capital is also part of that. Would we be able to play a role in that, or is there something that would maybe prevent the attraction of capital to our community and to the young people who are emerging from our institutions and starting these companies?
So, really great question. Goes hand in hand. There's work that's been done by KEDCO in the past on trying to match up dollars to entrepreneurs. There's been lots of different programs that we put into play to try to seed some of these things. So summer company is another perfect example, very small scale, but these students are getting grants to do their companies. Another role for KEDCO is to match up with government programs to bring in some of that money. If you're talking about setting up large venture funds to think of the tech sector and things like that, challenging, but something that probably needs to be done. So.
Thank you. And the last one moves away from that. Just Mr. Emmer had mentioned at least 3 regions, the Quinte region, the Waterloo region, and the Niagara regions up there on our graph. So it seems like regional approaches where different municipalities or communities buy into the larger economic growth seems to be adopted in other parts of Ontario. Do you think that this is a trend that should be considered by our committee going forward?
I've always been a very strong proponent of the regional model. There's challenges, there's communities not far from here that are reviewing that. It's very hard to sometimes get over the geographic political boundaries. Kingston took care of that many years ago. And working collectively, and I should mention, when we did these numbers, Kingston's population, it's about the same as Peterborough, but this feels like a much bigger town. You've got the islands, you've got the Frontenac, I think it's a township there. You represent a much bigger draw area, not to mention your 2 post-secondary. I should have mentioned St. Lawrence before. So, yeah. So I mean, that's really where I think your advantages are.
Great. Thank you for answering my questions.
Okay. Councillor Bowman. Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I know Mrs. Gillespie mentioned the provincial funding for the small business development. Is that something that we get access to because of the setup of KEDCO? So is that when we can leverage those provincial dollars for small business development under a different model, would we still have access to that money, or would that possibly disappear?
My understanding is that the Province of Ontario funds small business enterprise centers, so SBECs, all across the province, and how they're affiliated with a head office or if they're a standalone is determined by the community. So there is potential. I'd have to check with our small business development team and provincial representatives to be clear, but I believe that if there was a different model, that Kingston would still have a small business development center of some form.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question is actually for Mr. Amir, was it? Amir? Okay, so I guess the question is, in your opinion, Kingston, based on the chart, scores in the middle of the pack. Essentially, you mentioned usually there's a review every 3 to 5 years. In your opinion, would it make sense for KEDCO, as City Council renews every 4 years and sets a new set of strategic priorities, would it make sense for KEDCO to actually kind of realign with that sort of every 4 years as we set those strategic priorities, or do you think that would tie them down and kind of be a negative thing?
You know, that's a great question. I have personal experience with that. I was with an organization that actually set up an offset timing. So in the middle of a council term would be when the organization, not necessarily an organizational review, but they would undertake a strategic planning exercise to give the new council that opportunity. So many people do run, and I've seen it in many municipalities, and you see changes. I mean, I've seen EDOs, the day after election, there's changes made. But what it does is it provides some stability, an opportunity for new councillors to come in and get sort of the lay of the land, and there may be change needed, there may not, some tweaking, and giving the council a real opportunity to be engaged. So I think it is important to stagger that. You may say, hey, we got a new council, let's start right now, and sometimes that can work, but I have seen the experience, and I thought it worked really well, where It was a 4-year agreement with the organization, renewable every year. That was the other thing. I worked with an organization every year. They came hand in hand. I don't know how KEDCO does it, but having that stability with accountability and regular reporting can certainly work very well and answer some of the questions. I haven't really delved into what's gone on here. I just did this little report, but I'm happy to share sort of from my high level experience.
Okay. And just one more quick question. As far as some of the comments you'll hear in the community are, people hear about KEDCO, some people think it just works for big businesses, other people have no idea that, you know, if you want to start a small business, is there possibly with the review board a look at bringing in, you know, some students or some young entrepreneurs and actually looking at them specifically, not just community members, but targeting them, seeing as that's where the, you know, the future entrepreneurs are going to come from? Would that be something where you'd actually want to make sure there was a couple spots on that board or the review committee for them, rather than just general community members?
So I think it's important to have representation from what you either know or anticipate will be the main influencers going forward. So, you know, we hear a lot about that, and having someone that has direct experience, knowledge, or some vision for that. Donna mentioned as she was going through the list, and I was saying, don't forget Launch Lab, and she didn't. I mean, you've got some great entities there, and I know that organization. I was with another organization that helped fund them a bit, and they cover much more than this area. They're down into Durham and up north of Peterborough now, but they're here, so they're in your backyard. It's to your advantage. So I think being inclusive is important. Having an open mind and looking at what's going to work best for your community is the key thing. So, and it's tough to find people that have the time, knowledge, and interest in doing that. And you definitely have people in this room that are interested. So I think you're well on your way to doing what you need to do to make this place continue to be a great community that I love to visit, and I invest here regularly. Not on a capital scale, but lots of tourism dollars come into. And I should mention, I don't know if you have an angel network here. Angel investors, many communities have them. It's business leaders who get together. Typically, they would look for a minimum of $250,000 investment. There's a national network involved. I did some work with an angel network. I know west of here in the Lakeshore, they're looking at that. That is one way. The challenge is, and if there's any bankers in the room, raising capital for anything in Canada is tough. Compared to the US, it just is very, very difficult. But angel networks and some of the Ontario venture capital programs that are run by Queen's Park actually have good value. I think they're relaunching one of those now, but that's, I would hesitate to get your economic development organization heavily involved in that unless it was looking for local capital.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. So, Mr. Amer, I think you made reference to this, that we're engaging in a very public review process, and that could potentially send a negative signal, because investors might say, well, what's going on in Kingston? So I guess my first question would be to KEDCO. What will be happening during this transition period? So is economic development frozen for the next 6 months, or is it business as usual? Can we have some sort of indication of what will be going on in parallel with this review process?
That's a really good question, and we want to make sure the community and council knows that KEDCO is open for business. I have a committed team with me, all of who came out this evening, whether they're in this room or in the overflow room. We are answering the phones. We are putting in as many hours as needed to support each other, support our clients, and to make sure that no inquiry goes unanswered.
Thank you. I guess my second question, you may be aware that one of our strategic priorities for council is creating a smart economy. And so we've heard questions about innovation and entrepreneurship, but there are other elements in that strategic plan about an integrated tourism strategy. There's strategies for technology infrastructure investments, so fiber, broadband infrastructure. And so just to be clear, is part of the mandate of this review to try to make sure that KEDCO is aligned with what council wants to do over the next 3 years?
Most definitely, and there is the timing situation where we launched our strategic plan 2015-2020 last December, which was before council established its new strategic priorities. I think there's a lot of synergies. I think we are aligned in many ways, but I'm hoping that the review process will take a look at both our documents and make sure that we're working in tandem and that KEDCO services and our direction is supporting your priorities.
Thank you. Last question. Does the review committee have a mandate to look at the structure of the organization so that, is it possible that we could end up with a very different looking economic development agency 6 months from now?
That's a very valid possibility. We want to get public feedback. We want the review committee to look at where we're at, look at options based on that feedback, and then come back with recommendations. So that'll be something for board and council to address when we hear what happens.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much. Okay, so with that, we have no other briefings. Are there any petitions to present? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am presenting a petition on behalf of the residents of Kings Court Rideau District, and it reads, "We, the undersigned, wish to report our concern over the condition of the playground equipment located in Ronald LaValle Park at 53 4th Avenue. Not only is it outdated, but we view it as being unsafe. Some of the equipment shows signs of corrosion. The slides are metal and become very hot on sunny summer days. Our neighborhoods have seen an influx of young families, and they deserve access to the safer and more user-friendly equipment that has been installed throughout the greater city of Kingston." And it bears 62 signatures.
Okay, thank you very much. We do have a motion of congratulations, moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Stroud, that the congratulations of Kingston City Council will be extended to the Kingston District Agricultural Society on the occasion of its 185th anniversary. We'll begin with funding from the Legislative Assembly in 1830 and the first agricultural exhibition in Kingston by the Midland Central Agricultural Society the same year. The Fall Fair is hosted by the Society and has been held every year for the last 65 years on the Memorial Center property. The Kingston Fall Fair is an enduring institution and a tradition of which we are very proud. Congratulations. Motion of condolence moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Neal, that the condolences of Kingston City Council will be extended to Matt Poirier, Program Coordinator with Cultural Services, on the passing of his mother-in-law, Susan Brogley, on September 1st, 2015. Our thoughts are with Matt and his wife, Sue, and daughter, Lucy, during this difficult time. So we will call the vote. And that carries. We have no deferred motions tonight, so we will move on to reports. Report number 87 from the CAO.
It's moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Candon. Report number 87 from the Chief Administrative Officer, consent, be received and adopted.
So there are a number of clauses A through H. Would anyone like anything separated? Councillor Neal. C has been separated. Councillor Allen? F and G. Okay, so seeing no other separations, we'll deal with the balance of the items. So item A is Municipal Council Blanket Support Resolution for rooftop and non-rooftop solar photovoltaic applications of less than 500 kilowatts made under the Provincial Feed-in Tariff Program 3.1. Item B is the Community Investment Fund Administration. Item D is a guarantee for Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation loan. Item E is a request for municipal approval, Cataract Way Cemetery, 927 Purdy's Mill Road. And item H, parking changes at Polson Park Elementary School. So we will call the vote. And that carries. Item C, award of contract for construction services at Bell Park Fairways for golf green and tee relocation. Councillor Neal.
Yes, thank you very much. A couple of questions. The one concerns what is the unique nature or requirements that would have made this an RFP rather than a tender? Because it looks like landscaping and and fairways maintenance. So what is unique about this, this project?
Mr. Folwell.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. It falls in line with our regular park development programs. It is unique in the sense of the golf green construction component, and we were seeking some direction on a pre-qualified contractor to complete that work, but it's something that we continue to do through our department is the RFP process.
And this may be a question for a commissioner or legal. When, as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that after this single respondent to the RFP came in, there was some tweaking or alteration to the requirements or the components of this in order to get a lower price. I know if that was a tender issue, it would be retendered. When does it become substantial enough that you need to go back out to the market?
Commissioner Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So I first will start by saying that this is not the first time. There have been multiple times where we have, after the closing of an RFP, we have reviewed our scope. And the reason why we do that is because we have approved budgets by council, and we try to live within those budgets rather than coming back to council and asking for more money every time. So we do that, and we take the approach of looking at elements that are within the scope that we feel could either be removed or done differently in terms of the work, without impacting the overall project and without impacting the community use. So what we do, and this is permitted and allowed for RFP process, what we do is when we review that scope, if we have more than one proponents coming forward, we would reissue the information to all the proponents that have initially submitted. So all of them are able at that point in time to resubmit a revised price or revised information based on the new scope of work. If it is significant to the point where, let's say we were issuing something for a pool and we decided not to build a pool, then yes, obviously we would have to go to most likely back to the market. But in this case, what we're talking about are changes like we've removed the fencing from the scope of work. We have removed the maintenance component, which our staff is going to do during that period of time. So those are very minor elements that do not change the overall project and the outcome for the community.
Great. And my last question, and I would have contacted staff earlier, but this kind of came out of me reading the 2012 review document on tendering and RFP. I'm just curious about how often we get single applicant tenders and how often we get single applicant RFPs. Because, and this is so anecdotal, I hardly wish to say it, but it seems to me that we get more single applicant RFPs than tenders. When a tender goes out, we get more often get multiple applicants. If I'm wrong, and if I'm springing this question on staff, I apologize. I'd be quite happy to get a response afterwards if this is not a good time or the information isn't readily available.
Do you have anything to say on that at this point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have all the information, the corporate information for all RFP and tenders with me tonight, because obviously what's in front of council is actually a single project within the Recreation and Leisure group. But I can tell you that in the past year for Rec and Leisure, and I have here the list of RFPs that we've issued, the majority of them had multiple proponents. So by far, the majority of our RFPs would have had more than one proposal coming forward. But again, I think if the information that the councillor is looking for is corporate-wide, I think that needs to be provided at a later time, and there needs to be some information pulled together for that.
Say Johan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to add to that from a process perspective, council has seen a number of times over the last 8 months where there have been some single source or some single bids on tenders, particularly around vehicles, and we've talked about how we might change the process so we get more people interested in bidding. And in fact, recently we've seen that with one of the recent tenders. So I would just anecdotally say that the numbers are not skewed one way or another. It's a number of different circumstances occur. It could be the specifics. We use RFPs as a process when we're trying to get a creative solution. We're trying to ask the marketplace to bring their expertise to satisfy the need that we're trying to fill. Many projects that we actually have the identified need established, we then obviously use tenders. In road-related projects and sewer and water projects, almost all of those are tender projects. On a few occasions in the last 3 years or so, because of the complexities of parks and buildings and the design of those sorts of things, particularly in the recreation area, we have moved to an RFP process, but that is for a specific reason in terms of trying to get the expertise. With respect to this particular one, there could be any number of reasons why others didn't bid. All bids are managed in terms of what's proposed in the call for RFP response, and they're submitted to the clerk like any other bid, so it may very well be the nature of the request or who is available with the resources at this time of year to be able to respond to that particular bid.
Thank you, that's helpful. And if that information could be shared with all of council as to what the metrics are, that would be helpful, I think. Because I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments or questions, we will call the vote. And that carries. Item F is proposed various always stop intersections. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, just a quick comment to staff to thank them for a lot of the work they've done this season in my district to help improve safety. We'll see some more recommendations, I think, soon. But Burbrook Road and Cordix Road is a very interesting intersection because the road curves, and I know that when I drive it, I always slow down as if there's going to be a stop anyway. So this just sort of will put something into practice and clarify things for people. I also I wanted to mention this because the KMP trail wasn't in the report, but it also goes through that intersection. And so the KMP being a priority for us as council, adding safety to the pedestrians and cyclists who are moving through there by adding this is going to be fantastic. So I appreciate this recommendation. I'm not as, I think the other ones are great too, but this one was very important to myself and the constituents of my district.
Thank you. Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also would like to thank staff for the report, this section on the always stops. There's two in my district that are both, they're not four-way intersections. One of them borders the park and one of them borders a T-junction that happens to be right near another street and a primary school. So that one is Clergy and Earl. I know it well because I cross that intersection every day with my kids on the way to primary school, second primary school, which is 2 blocks away from there. So I cross in that direction, and the kids coming to Sydenham Public cross in the other direction. And because there's a hill, cars tend to speed up the hill, and because there's another Clergy Street turns on an angle right into that intersection. It's a hazard coming from both directions, and with a school on either side, many kids living on the opposite side of that intersection from the school, it actually is a very high priority for pedestrian safety. And I'm happy to see that's coming. And I know that there have been requests in the community for the crossing guard from the Sydenham Public School to be relocated to that side of, to Earl Street rather than Barry Street for the same reason, and hopefully this will help. And as far as the Barry Street and Stewart Street one, that is from the end of the street that KGH is on in Botterill Hall. A lot of student traffic there, and of course nurses like myself going to work. That Barry Street is quite a fast thoroughfare coming up from King Street and to the corner that enters campus at Union. And it's probably going to be a little bit of an adjustment for folks to see the stop signs there, but I did have a question for staff. Was it considered, is it possible through the model to have a stop sign coming up from King at Stewart, and there's already one at the end of Stewart, but a yield or some priority signal for turning right onto Stewart from Barry? Was that a possibility? Because it seems like that's a lot of the traffic is going in that direction. And I know that from the report, the metrics, it wasn't quite, it didn't quite meet the thresholds. I wonder if staff could answer that.
Ms. Green?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, could you please just clarify, are you asking for traffic control at Barry and Stewart? So, for example, a signal as opposed to always stop?
No, not a signal. I was wondering if because the majority of the traffic seems, from my observations, to be turning right from Barry Street onto Stewart Street, or left from Stewart Street onto Barry Street, whether it was considered to not put a stop sign there to have that priority signal through a yield sign or something like that. I don't know if you still do that, but through the changes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, our concern with that would be mixing different types of traffic control. So we have completed updated traffic counts at Barry and Stewart, and it does show that always stop is warranted there. So we would consider that if we were to mix the stop and the yield, there could potentially be some confusion with the motor. So our preference would be to leave it as always stop in all directions.
Thank you. I anticipate some small complaints from some drivers, but probably some thumbs up from the many pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stanek.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I also wanted to thank staff for the stop sign at Lancaster and Milford. That will also help residents with kids cross over to Bridle Path Park from Lancaster Drive, from the sidewalk there, and I heard that request during the election last year, so thanks for that. And to add to Councillor Allen's Birdbrook Road and Cordutes Road with the KMP Trail, there's pedestrians, cyclists, and also horseback riders. Thanks.
Councillor Turner.
Just quickly, through you, Your Worship, I'd like to thank staff as well. I was listed here, Henderson Boulevard and Glencastle Road. It's a really busy thoroughfare, and I really appreciate that they put a stop sign there as well. There's buses and a lot of pedestrian traffic, so thank you, staff.
Okay, so we will call the vote. And that carries. Just before we get to item G, I just want to let council know it is already 9:20. We have a lot of agenda items ahead of us. If we do not finish tonight, then my intention is to call council meeting next Tuesday at 6 p.m. for the purpose of finishing the agenda. So we just kind of keep that in the back of our minds, and then we can make that decision later on about whether we want to try to finish everything or if we want to try to be brief in our comments and targeted and try to get through as many items as we can. Okay? Item G is various proposed speed limit reductions. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, there's a lot of great safety improvements recommended in my district here, and I think many of the residents will be supportive of these proposed changes. There is one that I have an amendment for, and you'll see it up here on the screen, so I'll cut to the chase on that one. And this is just, the justification for this amendment is that Unity Road is 60 kilometers an hour everywhere except for this remaining section that we'd like to fill in here, from Battersea Road all the way to past Elginburg, actually. So it's quite, I think it would make for a more consistent and predictable level of speed in a similar zone where the uses are the same. So we're recommending that we make this adjustment in order to have a more consistent speed across the across Unity Road, especially in that zone. There's a church that has many people coming in and out. There is also a school on the other side of the hill that has traffic to it at the end of the road. So this would fill in a kilometer of, or I think I measured it in my car, 1.2 kilometers of 60 of remaining 80. The recommendation that already is here is creeping up on that, but I'd like to expand that to cover the whole span of that road.
Okay, so there's an amendment that's been put forward on the floor. It's moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Osanik. Are there any questions or comments on the motion to amend? Councillor Hutchison?
I think in these cases, we should ask staff what their opinion is. So I'm doing that.
Ms. Green?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a reasonable request. It is an area that is still under investigation by staff. We measured it to be about 1,300 meters. There aren't as many driveways there or as much development, so it is an area that if we did post it at 60, we would have to continue to work with police to request additional enforcement, but we believe the request to make it all 60 along Unity is reasonable.
Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, we will call the vote on the motion to amend. Please vote. And that carries. On the motion as amended. Please vote. And that carries. Report number 88 from the CAO.
Moved by Councillor Cannon, second by Councillor Turner, that report number 88 from the Chief Administrative Officer recommend be received and adopted clause by clause.
Okay, so there are 3 clauses. The first clause is the third crossing action plan update. Councillor Bill.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. 1960. We've been talking about this since 1960. 55 years. All I want to say is I don't want to be talking to my grandkids about the bridge Kingston could have built 60 years from now, and then saying 115 years ago, there could have been a bridge, etc., etc. The city does not own their own crossing. There's the LaSalle Causeway, federally owned, Kingston Mills, federally owned, Highway 401, provincially owned. About a month ago now, we experienced what happens when the LaSalle Causeway shuts down for 2 days. We experience what happens when there's construction on the 401. We experience what happens and the frustration when people are commenting to us, why do we have no control over these things? It's time, folks. It's definitely time. To put it in perspective, the expansion of John Counter Boulevard was $63 million. The Point Pleasant water treatment upgrade was $75 million. We're looking to go to other levels of government for roughly 2/3 of this. Our own portion would be somewhere between 50 to 70 million likely. This is completely doable by the city. It's not only doable, it's logical. Some facts people might not know is 50% of base personnel that work there, Kingston's largest employer, are now choosing to settle in the west end of Kingston. This is not an East End issue. This is a City of Kingston issue. This is about connecting all of our communities together, owning one of our own crossings so that we're not at the mercy of other levels of government, And this is something that it's definitely long overdue. So 50% of the people that work on the base live in the West End. So they're trying to come east, and people in the East End, which is experiencing a population boom and is scheduled only to grow in the future, are going to get jobs in the West End or already have jobs there. So this, literally, when you look at it from a larger thing, it's not just a piece of infrastructure, it's about connecting the community as a whole. It makes sense. You've got John Counter Boulevard, it goes all the way up to Taylor Kidd. You connect that bridge across, you've got Highway 2, which could come down, and then all of a sudden you've got a great route. You've got an expansion of bus routes, emergency services. We're no longer at the mercy of other levels of government to get access to the east side of the city or the west side of the city, depending on where you originate from. The Pittsburgh District and the East End is only going to grow. It's going to continue to grow. That's where the growth is slated in the future of Kingston. So I'll happily be supporting this. Again, it's long overdue. I will work diligently to see this bridge in my lifetime, and I would ask that my other fellow councillors support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions or comments, we will call the vote. And that carries by a vote of 8-5. Number 2, non-statutory Citizen Advisory Committee review. Councillor Stroud.
So are we separating by clause, or should I talk to any clause I would like?
So there is only one clause.
So by section?
We can separate, so there's only one item, but we can separate particular items for the purposes of voting or for the purpose of deferral. So you have 5 minutes to speak to everything that is part of this clause, but if you want to take a particular item, if you wanted to defer it, or if you wanted to have it separated so that you wanted to vote specifically on that subclause, then we can do that.
Okay, well, I do have an amendment that the clerks should have on section 5, dealing with the merger of the Museums and Corrections Advisory Committee and the Municipal Heritage Committee. And I'll just...
So can I just get that on my screen? So Councillor Stroud, so you're putting forward an amendment. Has it been seconded?
Seconded by Councillor Schell.
Okay. So go ahead. You can explain the idea behind the amendment.
Okay. So first of all, I fully support the CAO's efforts to find efficiencies with staff time by consolidating certain committees and working groups. This is a difficult exercise, but it benefits us all, freeing up staff time for like I say, efficiencies. Most importantly, though, there has been up to now no consultation with individual committee members of either committee. I chair the Heritage Committee. I have an idea of what people would be thinking on that committee because I see them often. I have had no contact whatsoever with anyone from the Museums Committee other than one email from an important member. And he was asking for it to simply be deferred until consultation can occur, and I would rather actually amend it. And I've got details here about how to have the consultation occur, if you read the amendment. And the reasoning is that eventually, if all members from both committees, if we want them to continue as productive members of the new merged committee, we kind of need buy-in. We kind of need these members to understand why they're being merged. And if we sort of have this top-down, high-level edict that just sort of says you're now with this other committee, we may lose members. And that's kind of the gist of the email that I got from the one member. Just a point, section 7 of the same clause talks about consolidation of some working groups between the two, there's shared mandates between museums and heritage, and the working groups can be merged, I think, immediately, so I'm not proposing any amendments to that. I think with this amendment, we reach the same result eventually, but we're not shoving it down anyone's throat. We're asking for their input, especially on the question of the new composition of the new committee. And I'm sure that we can reach consensus with these two sessions to be incorporated into heritage. So I'm asking for council support on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion to amend that is on the floor. It's been duly moved and seconded. Is there any comment on the motion to amend? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, just I think we've maybe heard from different members of different committees, and when it comes to amending for this committee, then we'll have to consider the same approach, to be fair, to many of the other committees. And I wonder if this is the best course of action for us as a council to start picking apart this item to provide the means for each committee to deal with its potential future. So I'm not going to move anything, but I think that perhaps council should consider this report in a future date in a chance to let our active and valuable citizens who have been participating in these advisory committees have a chance to, A, hear about it, because even though this report talks about engagement and consultation, it did take either a news article or some of us reaching out to let committee members know.
Is he talking to the amendment?
Point of order.
Yeah. Sorry, are you talking to the amendment specifically now?
So, yeah, I'm
speaking.
Whoa. Yeah. Okay, that's my job to respond to the point of order. So, my ruling on that would be that Councillor Allen is speaking to the concern that it's basically a precedent about whether we would have to do this with other committees. So I think it's a fair comment. I mean, we can choose to agree or disagree with it, but we'll allow it. So continue.
And so that's my thought, is that we should consider deferring the whole report in order to allow our committees to hear about this, respond, and then have probably a much more difficult decision to make down the road in terms of where to go forward with this. So I don't think I'd be... Actually, I'd probably support the amendment. It doesn't really matter. I just want to make sure that the whole report is also addressed in a fair and equitable manner.
Thank you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you. I'm going to support this amendment, but if I heard Councillor Allen's possibility of a blanket amendment to defer, if we go that route, I would support it as well. I attend whenever possible this committee, and the difficulty is that they have very, very heavy agendas, and they probably have the longest meetings of any standing committee. And to merge another committee and add to that, I think is potential.
So Councillor, I'm just going to stop you there. In my view, you're speaking to whether or not these two committees should be merged, but the amendment is not actually addressing that. The amendment is addressing the process by which that would be merged.
Yes.
I'm just going to ask you to speak to the process.
And my point is that having the input from both committees as proposed here, I think would potentially improve the process and would allow for a more workable information to come back. This isn't the only committee. I think all the committees, the one unfortunate thing is that, and Councillor Allen was right, none of the committee members were aware of this unless they were told this was coming. So giving these two particular committees an opportunity to work collaboratively and to see whether this is a feasible situation, I think is positive, so I'll support it.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor George, will you take the chair?
I certainly will, Your Worship, and I recognize you.
Thank you. So I'm happy to support this amendment because my interpretation of this is that it's not changing the strategic direction of council. It's simply asking for input from the two committees in terms of the best process to arrive at the end goal that we're looking at. And I think that that's a critical distinction. I think that it's up to council to take a high-level view and say, if we want to do more strategic communication, if we want to really pursue our strategic goal of fostering open government, then we need to be brave enough to make changes. We can't do everything we've done the old way. We need to be open to those changes. So, in my view, the compromise is that we make the tough decisions. We say, no, we are actually going to merge a committee, or we may dissolve a committee, but we're happy to have input from that committee, in this case, about how the best way to arrive at that is, say, over the next couple of months. So I'm happy to support the amendment that Councillor Stroud has been put forward. Thank you very much.
And I will return the chair to you and make note that Councillor Schell would like to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Schell.
Thank you very much, Mayor Patterson. I am on both of those committees, actually, and I think this is such a potential win-win that I'm very pleased staff brought it forward. I'm also pleased that our CAO is prepared to facilitate these meetings as well, because I really think that his expertise will be very helpful. But I think, as I say, the potential is huge. The Heritage Committee has already turned into built heritage and cultural heritage, and I think that bringing in the museums and collections strengthens the whole cultural side, which I think is very important. It also recommends that the Arts Advisory Committee have a lot more connection with the new committee, which will also, to me, be an overarching help to the culture plan. I mean, to me, it's just, and as KEDCO undergoes some interesting changes, I think we could have some wonderful synergies here. But, you know, it's the old divided, we're not as strong as if we're consulting and working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stroud, you have the last word on your amendment.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, councillors, for your input on this. I neglected to mention the first time around that actually this amendment is a result of discussions directly with CAO Hunt, which is when he made the offer of actually coming himself and facilitating those two meetings to help with the merger as well, which is a very generous offer, as Councillor Schell pointed out. And so CAO Hunt, this is his report, and he was fully aware of this amendment before it came forward, and it's a result of collaboration between us, so, and with Councillor Schell. So I should have mentioned that right off the bat, but I don't know if CAO wants to say anything at this point, but or if it's all been said, but I think that you should know that he is supporting this amendment as well, as that he's indicated that to me anyway.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, we will call the vote on the motion to amend. And that carries. So, Councillor Stroud, you still have 3 minutes on the clock if there's anything else that you want to say to the motion.
Thank you. Because of this this facilitated merger, it actually the rest of the bylaw amendments that go along with the merger are somewhat problematic timing-wise. And I know that we've talked about timing before, so bear with me. So now we've got 2 facilitated sessions in October and November with a merger to happen at the end of November. But elsewhere in this, in section 6, I, it says delete museums and collections in its entirety, and section 6, P, it says revise the composition of the committee, and it talks about the composition, and then there's 4 bullets there about the actual workings of the new committee. I feel that if we leave those in as written, it will kind of cause much head scratching at the 2 committees when we have these facilitated sessions, because the result has already been put into law if we pass it tonight. Whereas if we pass these after November 30th, then once the talks have happened and everybody's happy with the way that we're going to put the new committee together, then it would make sense to delete the Museums and Collections Committee and have the composition of the committee set in writing in the bylaw. If we do it in advance, it begs the question of whether we're really trying to accomplish anything in the facilitated sessions or just really trying to walk people down the aisle, you know? So with that in mind, I was just going to say that we should defer section I and section P of number 6, sorry, letter I and letter P of number 6, until November 30th.
Okay, so there's a motion to defer on the floor to defer items 6I and 6P to November 30th, 2015. Do we have a council meeting on November 30th?
Well, until after, I guess it should say.
Okay, so the next council meeting would be December the 1st. So I think it would be better if we could say the motion to defer until the December 1st, 2015 council meeting.
Yeah, that's great. If the clerk can make that adjustment, that's perfect. That's more specific.
Okay, so just making that brief change. Debate on a motion to defer is to time or place. Seeing no further comment.
Is this place automatically city council?
So right now, we would interpret that as coming back to city council, yes. Okay, so we will call the vote on the motion to defer. Please vote. And that carries by a vote of 12-1. Councillor Stroud, you have 32 seconds on the clock.
I just liked on number 4, the dissolution of Near Campus Neighborhoods Association. I would like, advisory committee, I would like to just quickly clarify, because it was reported in the Week Standard with the...
I'm just going to stop you there. So our procedural bylaw does not allow councillors to speak to things that may have appeared in the media and to try to clarify them. So just to apply that rule fairly, I need to stop you there. You're welcome to make any other comments.
Okay, so there's a perception that this committee should be able to deal with rowdy student behavior, and I would like to say that I encourage further meetings of the stakeholders that were members of this committee. Even after its dissolution, these meetings can take place. I'd be happy to facilitate them, to have brainstorming about how to move forward with constructive solutions to the rowdy behavior problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Holland.
Wait, am I speaking now on whatever clause I want in this? Okay, thank you.
Yes, so you have 5 minutes to speak to the entire item.
Okay, no, that's not necessary, but thank you. So I would like to just ask a couple, well, first of all, just to mention that I am the chair of the Memorial Center Advisory Committee, and I do support the strategic direction put forward by the CAO and by council to have our committees align with our objectives. I think the direction here to dissolve the Memorial Center Advisory Committee is based on some valid points, and certainly the fact that other municipal facilities do not have their own committee is one of those. I think we can all rest assured that the Memorial Center area is in very good hands with the district councillor and with a very engaged neighborhood association, and I'm frankly confident that staff will deal effectively with other stakeholders. One stakeholder in particular, though, there is some question about the role of the Agricultural Society in this advisory committee, and whether or not that role has been mandated by another level of government. So I would just like to ask for clarification on that point to staff, if the staff are available. Thank you.
Who would like to take that? Commissioner Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor, I can maybe start and try to answer the question if I understand it correctly, but basically from a staff perspective, we would continue to work with the Agricultural Society as we have been actually for a number of years now. They do have, well, their main activity on site is a fall fair. They do hold some meetings, and they do have space within the community center. So none of that would change in terms of the actual committee itself. As you know, the committee was not meeting very frequently. So, and the items that were being discussed at committee meetings really didn't revolve around the Agricultural Society. So in terms of the committee not being active, it wouldn't really have an impact on how we work with the Agricultural Society and the day-to-day operations.
So I think that Councillor Holland's question, if I understand it correctly, was more if there's a mandate or a legislative requirement to maintain a committee or board for the Memorial Center with the Agricultural Society having a seat on that board. Can staff address that Commissioner Hurdle?
Through Mr. Mayor, I will try to address that and welcome any of my colleagues to jump in as well. But to my knowledge, no, there is no legal requirement to maintain a committee. The boards that used to exist were under some older legislation, previous legislation, which changed when the amalgamation of the municipality took place. So there is no requirement at this point legal requirement to my knowledge, to continue this committee and have the Agricultural Society part of it.
Councillor Holland, are you finished any other?
I guess I'm going to wrap it up, I think, at this point. I think well, I'll just conclude by saying that along with my colleague, I have received some expressed concerns about the fact that this committee is dissolving from committee members who weren't aware or involved in the process. So while I support the initiative, it would be really good to have some more time to have those people able to be part of it.
Thank you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Councillor Holland, for that segue. I've also heard from people in the community, including the current member and representative of the Agricultural Society, who would have loved to have come tonight in delegation. They're in the midst of preparing for the fall fair, so there was no way that she nor a representative could come. She only became aware of this when I contacted her via email, and so clearly they traditionally and historically have had a stake in the Memorial Board before and the Memorial Center, and I think we need to add some clarity to, if it is a misperception, we need to define the misperception that there is a piece of legislation, of federal legislation that recognizes the Ag Society as having a stake historically in the Memorial Center. That obviously can't happen tonight. So I would request, if I might, and I did leave an amendment with with the clerks to move deferral until the last meeting in October.
So I'm just going to stop you there. So Councillor Neal, you have a motion to defer that you want to present. Can we just see that? Okay. So this is moved by yourself, seconded by Councillor Holland to defer Clause 2, items 3 and 6J. Okay.
Exactly. Just only the recommendation for the dissolution of the Memorial Center Advisory Committee.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer that's been duly moved and seconded. Debate is to time or place. Seeing no debate, we will call the vote on the motion to defer. And that carries by a vote of 11 to 2.
Thank you. And just very quickly, my initial reaction about the dissolution of NICNAC, which, as I recall, came about when there was serious issues in the near-campus community, and I believe that it was Councillor Glover that initiated that originally. And I had some reservations about not having a forum for community organizations, representatives of the neighborhoods to be able to bring forward legitimate concerns. Having spoken with the chair of that committee and several members, and having spoken to the MAC representative of AMS, I have been convinced that perhaps the dissolution of this as a committee of council might not be a bad thing. However, I think I would encourage neighborhood associations that sit around that table, student groups such as the AMS, counselors who represent those areas. I don't think dissolving this committee will dissolve the issues that created the need for this committee. However, I do believe that it need not be a committee of council. If it's a community organization that comes together, if the open invitation to members of council to attend their meetings is there, and if issues come up, those members of council will have an opportunity to bring them forward. And so we don't need the staff allocation and the commitment because frankly it became more, and I attended most or many of the meetings, it became more of an information sharing forum than an action forum. So I support the dissolution of this with the assurance of the current chair that indeed we'll look for another forum to address those problems that seem to be somewhat recurring at times. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just briefly, I just wanted to mention that one of the most substantive conversations I've seen with the Ag Society about the Memorial Center took place at the Rural Advisory Committee meeting before I was on council in November of 2014. And there was, so there are places where we can house those conversations within the structures we've already had, and I hope that those conversations can go forward because there's a lot of great work that went into this report. To say thank you again, and maybe not start a chain of thank yous. But I think that aligning with our priorities is a great way to move forward with our committees.
Thank you. So we will call the vote. Oh, Councillor Hutchison.
I thought that, I don't know why he didn't do this, but Councillor Allen said he wanted to move to allow the members of the committees to have a say about the proposal. And I think that's a good idea. It saves me making a couple of amendments. So I'll move that the report be deferred while the committees affected have the opportunity to discuss the issue of the future.
Okay, so has this motion been submitted to the clerk? Has it been seconded? Do we have it in writing?
No, because I've got one for the Arts, Recreation, and Cultural Committees, but I can write one. It takes like 2 seconds.
So that's fine. So it's a motion to defer the entire item, so the entire report, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Because otherwise we'll be parsing here forever.
Until
the last meeting of November, I think, would probably be best, because they meet. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So there's a motion to defer.
It goes in line with the other amendments that were presented before.
Okay, so there is a motion on the floor to defer this report until the second meeting in November, seconded by Councillor Allen. Debate is to time and place. Councillor Allen.
Just a clarification from the clerks, if we can. The previous deferral was until the second meeting in October, was it not? Yes. Yes. So we have 3 meetings that we would then be dividing this report up into. So I would, what is it now? I would propose that we defer this, that we amend this to defer it to the first meeting of December, on December 1st.
So there is a motion to amend the motion to defer to the first meeting in December. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Bell. Any discussion on the motion to amend? We will call the vote. So this is on the motion to amend, which would change the deferral date from the second meeting in November to the first meeting in December. Please vote. Still one person to vote. And that carries by a vote of 11 to 2. Councillor Neal, do you have a point of order?
I do, and it may not be ruled as a point of order. I'd like an opportunity to withdraw the motion asking for the one orphan committee now, which would be the Memorial Center, to come back for the end of October.
Mr. Clerk, can I see you for a moment?
Since the report in its totality is for the 1st of December.
Sure.
Okay, sorry about that. This is an incredibly complex problem that we've created for ourselves tonight, okay, the problem, so I'm just going to explain this to council. The problem with deferring the entire report is that by deferring the report, we essentially nullify the previous amendment that Councillor Stroud put forward, which is to have those facilitated sessions happening in October, November. So here's what we're going to do, and then I'm doing this with the permission of the clerk. So with the consent of council, this motion to defer would defer everything but still allow those facilitated sessions to go forward to allow for that merger of those two committees. So we're procedurally, we're trying to do this as easiest as we can. So if everyone understands that, what we didn't want was to nullify something that previously happened. So Councillor Neal, to your point, yes, there was a motion to defer to October, November for the Memorial Center Committee. This motion would trump that because we would basically be taking the whole report to December the 1st.
I appreciate that, Trump. Thank you.
All right. So given that, is there any other debate or discussion on the motion to defer the entire report to December the 1st? Okay, seeing none, we will call the vote. And that carries by a vote of 9-4. Okay, so item number 3, City of Kingston Workforce and In-Migration Strategy Work Plan. We'll call the vote. And that carries. Report number 89 from Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. It's my pleasure to present report number 89 from the Planning Committee for consideration by Council. Thank you. Thank you.
It's moved by Councillor Shell, seconded by Councillor George. The report number 89 from the Planning Committee be received and adopted.
So there are two clauses. Would anyone like either of them separated? Okay, seeing none, we will vote on them together. So item 1 is a zoning bylaw amendment for 3188 Princess Street, and item 2 is a zoning bylaw amendment for 440 Brock Street. Please vote. And that carries. We have nothing from Committee of the Whole. We do have one information report, tender and contract awards subject to the established criteria for delegation of authority for the month of July 2015. Seeing no questions, we have no information reports from members of council. Miscellaneous business. Motion of council is required for number 1, that is requested by Waffles Community Robotics. Council proclaimed November 21st, 2015 as First Robotics Day in the City of Kingston. Moved by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Bohm. We'll call the vote. And that carries. Number 2, that is requested by the Association Canadienne Française de l'Ontario. Council approved the raising of the flag on September 25th, 2015 in Confederation Park in the City of Kingston. Moved by Councillor Bohm, seconded by Councillor Neal. All those, please vote. And that carries. New motions. So for new motion number 1, I will hand the floor over to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and we have a motion duly moved by Mayor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Holland, which reads as follows, and it is a little lengthy, but we'll try and get through it here. Whereas Kingston Partners for a Safe Community is a not-for-profit organization that provides activities and programs aimed at aimed at reducing injuries and promoting safety within our community. And whereas KPSC delivers its programs and campaigns with support from a national framework for municipalities holding designation as safe communities. And whereas a safe community designation is a public confirmation of a community's intention to create a safer life for all its citizens, and whereas Kingston was designated a safe community in 1997 by the former Safe Communities Foundation, one of 65 communities across Canada to hold this designation, and whereas in 2012 Safe Communities Canada, together with 3 other national injury prevention organizations, merged to create Parachute Canada, a national charitable organization dedicated to preventing injuries and saving lives, and whereas Parachute requires all designated safe communities to be redesignated every 5 years, and Kingston has been asked to reapply for its designation this year, and whereas as part of the redesignation as a safe community, a resolution of council to endorse the designation and assign a municipal representative to the steering committee is required, and whereas the steering committee would meet 8 times a year and be comprised of a variety of community representatives, including representatives from local government, public health, police, fire, emergency, media responders, and community partners. Therefore, be it resolved that Kingston City Council provides its support to Kingston Partners for a safe community in their application for the redesignation of Kingston as a safe community, and that Council authorize a staff member to act as the municipal representative on the local steering committee, and that an official copy of this motion be provided to Kingston Partners for a safe community for use in their application. And Mayor Patterson, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I really don't have much to say. I think that this is an important initiative. Kingston was designated as a safe community back in 1997. This essentially is just to renew that designation moving forward. So I think it's an important cause and encourage council to support it. Thank you.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Councillor Deputy Mayor George. And through you, just really quickly, I did some background on Parachute and the safe communities, and it looks really great. And I just wanted to say on their website, they have some traffic calming initiatives, such as volunteers who drive slowly through your neighborhood as active speed bumps, rather than getting us to put in speed bumps. So look up the website, take a look at that, because we've all been looking for traffic calming solutions, and perhaps some neighbors would like to just provide that function through there. So I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this motion? Seeing none, I would ask to call the question. And that is supported with a 13 unanimous. And I will return the chair to you, Mayor Patterson.
Thank you very much. New motion number 2, moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor McLaren. Whereas a bump up of site plan for 495 to 513 Frontenac Street was passed unanimously by the previous Kingston Council, and whereas our council is committed to transparency and open government, whereas Patry Development has requested a zoning amendment and planning approval for development on Frontenac Street, and whereas considerable concern has been expressed by the public regarding approval of this project, including concerns regarding such site plan issues as parking, landscaping, and loss of trees, and whereas the delegation of authority bylaw allows for council to bump up site plan control applications to planning committee, and whereas this procedure will allow for further scrutiny of the impact of the development on the neighboring community, therefore be it resolved that the site plan control applications from Patry Development for 495 to 513 Frontenac Street outlined in planning file PC 14-073 be bumped up to the planning committee. Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much. I have a very comprehensive amendment that I shared with the clerks. If we could call that up, it's basically amending the total motion. And if we can call that up for council's perusal, just to give you background, I want to thank the mayor for meeting with me today and finding a way to find a compromise on this issue. I want to thank legal for addressing the question about who should be invited to the table to discuss I see somebody's doing sign language to me here. I'm getting thrown off my game somewhat. So this is in order as a motion and wouldn't be contrary to what perhaps was decided before. So,
Okay, so there's a motion to amend that's been put forward by Councillor Neal. Is it been seconded?
Yes, I believe my original seconder has seconded.
Okay, so it's been seconded by Councillor McLaren. The paragraphs 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 be deleted and replaced with, whereas the Ontario Municipal Board OMB decision has called on all parties in the appeal to negotiate a site plan proposed agreement to be submitted to the OMB for approval, and that the last paragraph be deleted and replaced, whoa, we just lost it. Okay, and that the last paragraph be deleted and replaced with the following wording, therefore be resolved that any site plan control recommendation from Patry Development for 495 to 513 Frontenac Street be presented as an information report to the Planning Committee prior to the submission to the OMB. So Councillor Neal, you have the floor.
I would be happy to speak to this. Indeed, as our legal counsel pointed out, there's a clear direction, and the ownership of this file is with the OMB. And the zoning has already been approved, although it's been stayed, or whatever the terminology is for that, in order for all the parties, and there are 3 parties, to come together and negotiate a site plan proposal. That will then go to the OMB for they are the approval body. It's no longer council. So what this motion will achieve is still giving an opportunity for transparency, because it will ask for an information report to come to a public session of planning, just as a bump up would do, but clearly councillors and members of the Planning Committee can ask questions, but we don't have the ability, it's been taken away from us by the OMB decision, we don't have the ability to amend that. I believe I've explained that in totally obtuse way, but that's what this motion in fact achieves. And again, I want to thank everybody who helped me kind of get my head around what the legal implications of the earlier motion were. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the motion to amend? Okay, seeing none, we will call the vote. And that carries. On the motion as amended, we'll call the vote. And that carries. New motion number 3, moved by Deputy Mayor George, seconded by Councillor McLaren. Whereas many residents have voiced their concerns over speeding vehicles on residential streets, and whereas many residents in and around these streets have concerns about the safety of the children attending nearby schools, and whereas technical justifications on occasion do not consider all the human behavior of drivers and pedestrians, therefore be it resolved that in the interest of public safety and the desire of many area residents, a bylaw be presented to amend bylaw 2003-209, bylaw for regulating traffic in the highways of the City of Kingston, subject to the provisions of the Highway Traffic Act as amended, in order to install an all-way stop control at the following intersections. Number 1, Ellesmere Avenue and Crossfield Avenue, and number 2, Hillendale Avenue and Fairview Road. Deputy Mayor George.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, I would like to propose an amendment, first of all, due to my error. And yeah, this is in regards to the streets as noted. In here I have Ellesmere Avenue and Crossfield Avenue, and it actually should be replaced with Crossfield Avenue and Emerald Street and Savannah Court. I had the wrong intersection noted when I sent the motion off to the clerk's office, so
So there's
my attention.
Okay, so we'll just pause there. So we have a motion to amend, seconded by Councillor McLaren. Do you want to say anything else to the motion to amend at this point? I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
No.
Okay, so if there's no other comment, we will call the vote then on the motion to amend. And that carries. Deputy Mayor, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think I'm only going to speak to the actual intersection that's in my district, and I'll allow Councillor McLaren to speak to that is in his district. We did do, there was a warrant count that was done, staff have done on this particular intersection, and it did not meet the warrants. So I have had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Van Buren, and I'm well aware that what I'm asking for is going in opposition to the current policy that we do have in place. One of the reasons that I'm asking for this is due to the safety of local residents, primarily school children. It was noted by the residents in the area that there are approximately 8 school buses that stop at this intersection each morning and then drop the school children off in the afternoon as well. And it has become troublesome with the accessibility for the children and their parents and such at this particular cross-section. I noted staff did put in place some of our signage that tracks the speed of the vehicles, and it was noted, I know one of the days that I was there, met with the residents, and actually our police chief who resides in the area stopped by, and we had an opportunity to view some of the vehicles that were actually speeding on this portion of Crossfield. And it was noted that there was a 4-way stop that was implemented. If anyone's familiar with Crossfield, there's actually it's not really a turnabout, but there's an area which actually Bert Meunier Park is located, and on the easterly leg there's a 4-way stop there, and actually does seem to have an impact on the traffic speeds in that neighborhood. In this particular area, we've had motorcycles that's been noticed pulling wheelies and flying down the street and that sort of thing. So what they've asked is if we could in some fashion look at trying to put in some type of traffic calming. They don't really want speed humps, but incorporating a 4-way stop may assist. The chief did have some patrol officers monitor this portion of Crossfield for me for a few days. We didn't note a lot of speeding at that time, but it may have been that the word was out. They were there and watch your traffic speeds in the area. But I would certainly hope that council, I know it's not the norm. I usually don't go against staff policy. I think the last time I did was on Lisa Street last term when I asked for a single stop sign, and it has really worked, just that one stop sign. We haven't had any other concerns expressed with traffic in that neighborhood. So I'm hopeful that this may be a means by which we can resolve some of the concerns here as well. So I'm certainly hoping that council will support this initiative, and I will turn the floor over to my counterpart, and he can speak to the streets that he's requesting assistance on. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you.
After the very first working meeting, I presented a petition from people in this neighborhood asking for a four-way stop sign. They also do not like speed humps or speed bumps of any kind, and they are very concerned with children. There are no sidewalks on this area, and it's a long stretch with a slight curve in it in which children play. And the biggest concern they have is speeders going through this intersection because there is no stop sign on the main thoroughfare. In a contest between a human being and a car, the speed of the car will determine the health of the individual. And the slower they go, the better it is for everybody, even if it's not necessarily at the intersection but along the main thoroughfare. If we can slow people down because there is a stop sign there, that would have a likelihood of increasing the livability of anybody who might get into an accident. If there are car-to-car accidents, the chances of the individuals being hurt are greatly diminished because they're wrapped in nice comfy seat belts and airbags. But when we're worried about children running onto the street, we want to have the traffic going as slow as possible. And in this case, slowing traffic down through a stop sign seems to make sense. It's the will of the people in that area based on the petition that I gave earlier in the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Hutchison.
I did this before, so I'll ask staff what they think. I noticed that not making the warrants didn't stop staff from passing a couple of these, or proposing a couple of these things earlier, though they said they were very close. So I'm just wondering what the other side of this, we get these from time to time, and usually we pass them, it seems to me.
Ms. Green.
Through your worship, we do acknowledge that we have an always stop. They are considered to be guidelines, not a policy. So that does allow us some flexibility with respect to recommendations for always stop control. In the past, we have made recommendations where intersections almost meet the warrants, or there may be other prevailing factors such as an extremely high volume of pedestrians. The two locations that are being proposed with this motion, Crossfield and Emerald, as well as Hillendale and Fairview, are very far from meeting the warrants. Hillendale and Fairview is a very low volume location. In fact, on Hillendale, we have less than 950 vehicles per day. We do see vehicle speeds on average about 55 kilometers per hour. So we acknowledge that residents may have some concerns with respect to the speed. We are, however, currently assessing Hillendale for traffic calming measures, and we will have a ranked and assessed list by the end of this year. Crossfield and Emerald, we do see higher volumes along Crossfield, but again, this one is very far from meeting the warrants, and that's mostly due to the fact that the number of vehicles on the side street, so on Emerald and Savannah, are very low. We only have on average 45 vehicles per hour, and we need 80. So we end up with 83% of the traffic on Crossfield and only 17% on the side street. So both of these locations are very well beneath what we need to meet in order for staff to recommend these.
Would it be, you're going to look at least at Hillendale, I guess. In that instance, which I know a lot better than the other one, would it be possible to put the stop sign in, you'll still go ahead and look at the traffic calming aspects, and then go ahead, change it if you decide to put traffic calming in? Is that an option? I think we've actually done that in the past, but you can remind me. And basically, I think the underlying thing is here, if you aren't making the warrants, people are still saying that there's safety issues. And I guess people would like to be, if we didn't vote for this, whether be assured that safety would not be compromised. I know staff have argued to me, in my district, that not putting stop signs in actually impairs safety in some cases, because people don't stop, right? So I think I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. And we had to wait for traffic calming, which takes a lot longer. Okay, so I'm just wondering what the effect is here with regard to these particular ones, because I know situations are different.
Ms. Green?
Through your worship, I'll answer that question in two parts. So I believe the first part of your question, you were asking if we went ahead and installed traffic calming measures, if we could go back and remove the always stop. So yes, that would be possible, but once the stop sign is in place, it is very difficult to remove it, especially once the residents become accustomed to it. We would require a bylaw change, and it would have to come back to council. So the removal of that always stop would be a decision of council. Secondly, we completed an extensive amount of research back in 2010 when we brought these always stop warrants to council with respect to compliance at intersections where we had installed always stop that didn't meet the warrant. So for example, if we had very low side street volumes. And what we clearly saw was a difference between the intersections where the always stop control was warranted versus intersections where it was not warranted. So we found that where it was not warranted, a very high number of motorists continue to roll through the intersection. So our concern with that is, as soon as we install always stop control, we do create a legal pedestrian crosswalk. And if we're teaching motorists with this stop sign that in essence, a high percentage of the time that they're arriving at this intersection, there isn't a car on the side street, they get quite conditioned to not respect the stop sign, unfortunately. And it requires a huge amount of enforcement to get motorists to pay attention to that stop sign. So our stance is that we're putting pedestrians at risk by installing always stops at locations with very low side street volumes.
I'll go just wait and see if anybody else has got something to say, because it sort of tears me asunder here. Because like I said, I've had this happen in my district, and I respect the two councillors and their residents, but I feel a little edgy about setting up conditions where we're actually inducing people to think they're safer than they actually are. And it also affects, I think staff is saying this, it affects the general educational level of drivers in general if you set up too many of these. I don't know, but there are places that I voted for stop signs, just to show you that I'm more than fallible. Where I've gone through them in following years, I'm thinking of Kingston here, and my God, they're everywhere. Okay, so, and you stop, so I don't know, maybe I think the people that make the motion get to speak last, so maybe they'd like to address this. Thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, will you take the chair?
Certainly, and I recognize you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'm just going to start off with a couple of questions for staff. First question, you'd mentioned, I think it was mentioned that Hillandale Avenue is currently under review for traffic calming measures. Is Crossfield Avenue under review as well?
Mr. Mayor, Crossfield has been on our list for at least 2 years, so it's already been assessed and ranked, and we will be reevaluating it. Right now, it's sitting at about number 10. That ranking could change, however, by the end of this year, but it will continue to be assessed and considered for future traffic calming measures.
Thank you. My second question was, if I recall the context of the concern about the Crossfield intersection was school kids crossing from one side of the road to the other because of the school bus. Is there any update on the potential for changes at the provincial level to allow for a crosswalk at some point in the near future?
Mr. Mayor, we are expecting in 2016 changes to regulations within the Highway Traffic Act that would allow us to install more crosswalks in the city that would legally require motorists to stop for pedestrians. So that means we would just need to install white ladder type pavement markings as well as black and white pedestrian type signage. So what we most likely would be looking at next year, as soon as this regulation receives royal assent, and we're quite optimistic and confident that this will happen, we most likely would look at the 10 courtesy crossings that we have in the city and change that yellow warning signage to regulatory type signage that would require motorists by law to stop for pedestrians, and then we would certainly be reevaluating other locations for future crosswalks.
Thank you. So I'm afraid I have a couple of concerns with this motion. The first concern I have is that we have implemented a traffic calming policy, and I'm sure everyone around the Horseshoe knows this, where you put forward 2 streets, everybody else puts forward 2 streets, and then staff try to do a triage and say, okay, what are the highest risk streets? What are the streets that require traffic calming? And then we sort of work down the list from there. And I will say, when you run for mayor and you walk the streets of every district, I can tell you I probably have a list of like 30 intersections, 30 streets that probably I'm like, wow, it would be great to put a stop sign here, it would be great to put, some other type of traffic calming there. There's got to be some way to make this fair. And my concern here, and I'm not suggesting a motive here, but my concern is that we are jumping the queue. So if Hillendale and Crossfield are already under consideration, presumably everybody else has put forward streets for consideration as well. This is kind of like overriding that. And my concern is that then everybody would have the incentive to start putting their streets forward directly to council. Why wait for the traffic calming policy? So that's my first concern. Well, I don't think that it's wise to go back to the old days where this is what council was like, right? And we always kind of said, okay, well, I want, a stop sign in my district and I want this in my district. We're trying to create more of a, high-level policy and try to make sure that every area of the city is treated fairly. The second concern I have is that I don't think, we're also assuming that the best type of traffic calming in both of these situations is a stop sign. And I mean, we've heard some concern about that, but I think that there are other potential options out there. And that's why I asked about the crosswalk option. If the concern is for school kids crossing the street at a particular time of day, presumably there might be maybe that's like a half an hour in the morning, right, where they're all trying to cross from one side of the street to the other. And presumably when they're getting dropped off with the school bus would have the stop sign that would come out and stop traffic anyways. So I'm guessing it's probably just in the morning when they're getting to the bus stop. And yet we're going to put a stop sign in there that's going to deal with traffic when there's no real problem outside of that half an hour on school days. So I'm just not convinced that a stop sign is necessarily the best approach. I'm not to say that it's not an issue, and I know that the intersection that Deputy Mayor is talking about, I think there is some measure that's required, but I think like a crosswalk would be a far better option. So I think it's these two issues. I think that we have a policy. If we override the policy, then suddenly, why even bother having a policy? So we have to think about the implications of that, and then also we need to take some expert advice from our staff in terms of what might be the best options. So I think for those two reasons, while I appreciate the concerns that have been brought forward by the mover and seconder, I'm afraid that I can't support the motion as is. So thank you.
Thank you, Worship. And take note, I believe Councillor Bohm and Councillor Schell would like to speak.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Bohm.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I'm going to concur with what you said there. My concern is I've had numerous traffic complaints brought forward to myself in my district, and I think we're going to be opening Pandora's box. And if this passes, although I understand the intent is to make the area safer, I think if this passes, we're all going to wake up tomorrow morning with suggestions about where speed bumps should come out, where speed bumps should go in, where crosswalks should be, where stop signs should be taken out, where four-way stops should be. And we've now started to operate outside of our own policy. So I'm worried about the precedent that it sets and kind of the amount of work that we're going to be sort of putting in ourselves, which we don't necessarily have the expertise in going forward. So although I do appreciate the intent was to make an area safer, I think that's something that, staff's heard about these areas and can go back and consider them. And I know that kind of going outside of our own policies, I think we'd end up in a year from now looking back and going, that was probably not a great idea. And the intent is good, but the method might be flawed. So for that reason, I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Schell.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I didn't comment on the Polson Park School item that we passed. But this is an interesting one because there have been requests from the neighborhood to have stop signs put in places in that area because there's a school and it's parents driving and stopping on the other side of the road, and then the children cross the road. And it's been city staff and the school that worked out the solution. The neighborhood doesn't really know that, although it made it clear in the report that for city staff and the principal of the school, you are no longer allowed to stop or park on the opposite side of the road. So they've worked out the solution. For the neighborhood, they wanted stop signs, but actually when I would say professionals worked it out, what's the best way to control the traffic, make sure children are safe. That was their solution. So I feel the same way. I do get a lot of requests, and I appreciate the fact that we do have a more professional analysis now, because I have read that other times that if you have stop signs all over the place, people begin to ignore them, and it gets even more dangerous. So I think maybe this might be a communication issue as well too, that we let people know as we communicate with our public why things are done the way they are and what are the safety implications. That we do have a set of standards and professionals backing them up. So I agree, I won't support it, although I do understand why people want these. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's funny, this has turned into quite a head scratcher. I have a question to staff regarding the timing of the streets. So Mr. Mayor made reference to the 2 streets per district that were asked. That's the pair system that we have, and I know I made my 2 requests. And Ms. Green mentioned that Crossfield was like number 10 on the list in Councillor George's or Deputy Mayor George's district, and I'm wondering the timing of the 2 streets that actually are to receive traffic calming measures, and when that happens and how often, and whether it would be possible to, in a way, bump these 2 streets up the list of those districts at all, to incorporate the concern that they're obviously representing their residents' concern. If they're, the one way that you evaluate the streets is through the actual numbers of traffic, but the other concern that you don't evaluate is the political side, which we do here, which is the concerns of the residents, which are also valid and don't make it into the matrix. I'm wondering what about the timing and whether there's any compromise solution to move these up the priority list.
Ms. Green.
Through you, Your Worship. Because we're still in the process of assessing at least 15 additional streets this year that have been forwarded by councillors, we will not have a finalized, assessed, and ranked list until the end of the year. And what we typically do annually is look at 5 or 6 of the top scoring streets. We move those forward to the next level, and we develop traffic calming plans for those streets. And we take those out to the public typically in April, and just gauge if there is enough support from the residents for those plans, and then traffic calming is installed later that year. So the traffic calming that we see happening now on streets, you see some speed humps, for example, on Lancaster. Traffic calming will be happening on Patrick. So we went out to the public this April, past April, but those streets were ranked last year. So we're always a year behind. We assess 1 year, and then we actually go out with the plans the following year. So we do have plans to go out on Crossfield, and we can get updated speeds and updated traffic counts this year and see if it stays at number 10 or see if it does allow us to bump that up further. We also expect traffic volumes to drop on Crossfield with the extension of Cataraqui Woods. We do expect some of that traffic to move off and take alternative routes, so that's something that we'll be carefully watching over the next couple of years.
Thank you. Thank you for the information about the timing. That was most illuminating. And also, I'm surprised by what you said about Crossfield, because I know that it's a relatively new subdivision, and I assumed that the traffic would be actually increasing in time. I hadn't considered the extension of Cataraqui Woods Drive. So I'm really torn. about this. I actually don't know what I'm going to do, but that's all I'm going to say for now.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Yes, Councillor Turner.
I think it's, thank you, and through you, Your Worship, I think it's a very tough issue, and I think that we've made a lot of points here at the table tonight. But I think it's important to get the community's input, and as you said, that you go out in April and discuss it with the community members, because I think if we were to pass a motion without the community's support, I would be very nervous about that. So I find it very difficult to vote on this, but I think I don't want to open up Pandora's box at this time, because it could lead to a lot of things, nasty things happening on my part, in my district anyway. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other speakers, Deputy Mayor, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship, but sounds like I'm fighting a losing cause. As I stated in my opening remarks, I fully understood staff's perspective on this, and it's not that I don't agree with it, because I understand. I've tried to relay the message as well to my residents that hopefully with the extension of Cataraca Woods Drive in the next couple of years, we'll see some of that traffic moved off, because there's also an argument, they're looking for street lights at Crossfield and Sydenham, but they're going to be north of that. I guess as a councillor for the district, and as Councillor McLaren has pointed out, I mean, it's not all just about the intersection, you know, itself. It's about the speed of the traffic, you know, and this type of thing. So I guess there's a lot of consideration beyond warrants to be taken into place. Unfortunately, our practice policy says one thing, and we're asking for something that doesn't comply with that. But I would hope that council, I'll put out one last request that council give consideration to supporting this, and we'll see what happens with the vote, and hopefully over time, if it doesn't go in a positive fashion for Councillor McLaren and myself, then hopefully some consultation with the general public in the future, and we can see if there's other methods and means by which we can look at traffic calming and safety issues being addressed, especially when it comes to some of the school children that you know, don't take the same care that the adults do in crossing the road and such. So anyways, I'll leave it at that, and we'll ask that you call the vote, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will call the vote on the new motion, which has been amended. Please vote. And that carries by a vote of 7-6. It is 10:45 on the nose, so I'm going to ask for a motion to extend the meeting, moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Holland. So a motion to extend the meeting to finish the agenda. And just a reminder that that takes 2/3 to pass. Please vote. Still one person to vote. And that carries by a vote of 12-1. All right. New motion number 4, moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Neal. Whereas there are approximately 12,000 Kingston residents living under the low-income cutoff, LICO, which is $15,600 per year, and the average base benefit for an adult receiving Ontario Works is $656 per month, or $7,872 per year. And whereas the 77% of Kingston residents living under LICO who do not qualify for the medical, travel, and transportation benefit or discretionary funds for employment-related travel pay $46.50 for a monthly affordable transit pass. And whereas the current affordable transit pass offers only a 35% discount, and at least 12 comparable cities in Ontario offer discounts of 50% or higher, and And whereas transportation plays an important role in a resident's ability to improve their economic, social, and health outcomes, and free or affordable transit are therefore essential to the development of a livable city. And whereas free off-peak transit 9:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. would enable residents living under LICO to access transit regardless of their ability to qualify for special subsidies through social assistance programs, thereby providing a greater number of residents living under LICO with opportunities to travel for employment or social opportunities while maintaining the current levels of provincial subsidy for Kingston Transit. Therefore, be it resolved that Council requests staff to provide options for a free off-peak transit pass for residents living under LICO as part of the upcoming Transit Fare Review 2016 to 2017. Councillor Holland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. First, I'd like to start by introducing an amendment, and I promise it simplifies things. And the clerk has it. Thank you.
So if we can just get that up on the screen. So a motion to amend, moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Neal. The new motion 4 from Councillors Holland and Neal be amended to delete paragraphs 5 and 6 and replaced with the following. Therefore be resolved that Council asks staff to provide more affordable transit options for residents under the LICO, including free off-peak service, and report back to the Environment, Infrastructure, and Transportations Policies Committee no later than Q3 2016. So we'll start the clock anew so you can speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess just to explain where this came from, there has been quite a lot of work with members of the community on a committee that have been dealing with affordable transit issues for quite some time. They work mainly in the social service sector and have clients who rely on transit passes. So we've been having these discussions for a while. We sort of threw around a few different ideas. The off-peak, the free off-peak was one that the committee saw as a good option, as sort of a starting point at maybe addressing a need that isn't currently being addressed. So that was one of the reasons for having that in there initially. However, when I started to look at bringing forward the committee's ideas and tying it into the current work plan, it became clear that that part of the motion was too restrictive. So that's why we've chosen to take it out. And rather than look at just addressing a small portion of the community and the need, the idea here is to allow staff the flexibility to research and put together some options that would address affordability in transit across the board. And so that's why the amendment is here.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the amendment only? Councillor Neal.
Yes, I support the amendment because I think it adds more flexibility and it allows staff to come back through the EITP committee with a series of options and costings that can be considered at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stroud.
Just a quick point that with the off-peak transit, this type of usage, I think it's fairly obvious. These buses are running anyway, and so the extra cost is not really significant, but the maybe loss of revenue is the question. So, and I don't think that's significant either because of the users we're talking about and what we heard in the presentation, the delegation at the beginning of the meeting. So that's a very important point, but it's not the only possibility for affordable transit. And that's what this amendment addresses, is it actually says this off-peak service, and in other words, it's sort of new improved version of the original motion, so I will support it.
Thank you. So we will call the vote on the motion to amend. And that carries. So Councillor Holland, do you have the floor?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this initiative, as I mentioned, came forward because of the hard work of quite a number of community members who service people living under low income, and that includes people on Ontario Works and Ontario Disability Support benefits. And There have been some changes in transit, specifically having to do with the introduction of the smart card, that have negatively impacted these clients. So before, agencies could provide a single-use pass, a ticket, and the buses would accept those. So that was serving a need that we no longer serve after the new smart cards were introduced. So that was one point that was brought forward. Another thing that is really important to consider is that as the delegation, the speaker that we saw in delegation tonight mentioned the fact that, at $650 a month, that somebody in Ontario works, and there is no guarantee subsidy for transit in that program. There are benefits that are available for people on OW, but they're only mandatory when they have to do with medical appointments. So any travel that's necessary for medical reasons. There are discretionary benefits as well, and that's a case where the caseworker could say that transit is needed for employment opportunities and therefore give funds, subsidies for transit in that case. So, but as I mentioned, those are discretionary. So there are many cases, about 20 or 77% of people who are living under low income do not actually qualify for any subsidy for the Affordable Transit Pass. The Affordable Transit Pass was introduced based on work that was done back in 2008 when a motion was put forward at EITP, and and that motion asked that that staff consider providing free passes to OW and ODSP recipients. Obviously, that recommendation was not the one that we went with. We went with the Affordable Transit Pass, and there's lots of good reasons for that. Most other jurisdictions, other municipalities have a similar program, a subsidized monthly pass, and that allows for the province to continue to put funds into as I mentioned, when there are programs like OW and ODSP where there are funds available from the province for transit, we can continue to get those offsetting funds. So the 2008 report is really interesting because it talks about the need. It actually, I'll quote, it says, public transit can make the difference between people leading productive and healthy lives, or, oh my gosh, I lost the rest of that quote, or not. So this was work that was done with EITP and the Poverty Reduction Roundtable, exploring the need and the options that were put forward at the time, while good, are not, in fact, affordable for many, many residents. So this motion is intended to get some more information, because one of the biggest problems is we don't know who currently is using transit, and if they're not using it because they are, for whatever reason that they're not using it, how they might better access transit, how we might better be able to provide for their need, whether that's more flexibility in the past with more single use, or a reduced rate, or whatever options that they actually require. So more information brought to EITP would certainly help have this conversation, put together hopefully another report and some recommendations on how to improve the affordability of our transit fares. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Seeing none, we will call the vote on the motion as amended. Please vote. And that carries. Okay, are there any notices of motion? Okay, seeing, I have a notice of motion. Moved by Mayor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Holland. Whereas the Kingston Economic Development Corporation, KEDCO, has been established to work collaboratively with the City of Kingston and local and regional partners to achieve prosperity by developing and promoting economic advantages to sustain and grow the economy of Kingston. And whereas Kingston City Council has directed that all external agencies and boards align plans with Council's priorities, and whereas there have been questions raised about KEDCO in the community in recent months, and whereas KEDCO is a separately incorporated not-for-profit agency and led by a board of directors appointed by due process, of which Kingston City Council members comprise 4 of a 12-member board, And whereas KEDCO's Board of Directors has recently announced the launch of a review of its mandate, operations, structure, and reporting methods, therefore be it resolved that Kingston City Council encourage KEDCO's Board of Directors to move forward with the review in an expeditious fashion, and that KEDCO continue to focus on economic development initiatives during the review period, and that KEDCO report back to City Council by the end of Q2 2016, and that by endorsing this motion, Kingston City Council demonstrates its support of the KEDCO Board of Directors and the proposed review process. Okay, Mr. Clerk, we'll ask for the minutes.
Moved by Councillor Candon, second by Councillor Turner, that the minutes of the special council meeting held Wednesday, August 26, 2015, and the minutes of City Council meeting number 2015-21 held Tuesday, September 1st, 2015 be confirmed.
Please vote. And that carries. We have some tabling of documents. We have some communication items. Is there any other business? Mr. Clerk, I will ask for bylaws.
Moved by Councillor Candon, second by Councillor Stroud. I just want to let everyone know that bylaw 2 was amended and bylaw 5 was deferred. So it's moved by Councillor Candon, second by Councillor Schell, that bylaws 1 through 4 and 6, 8, and 13 be given their first and second reading.
Please vote. And that carries.
Moved by Councillor George, second by Councillor Turner, that clause 11.34 of bylaw 2010-1 be suspended for the purpose of giving bylaw 4 3 readings.
Please vote. And that carries.
The bylaws 4, 6 through 13 be given their third reading. Moved by Councillor Bowman, Councillor Osanek.
Please vote. And that carries. I have a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Neal. Please vote. Still one person to vote. And that carries. Thank you very much.